Hello everyone. This is not a story for the faint of heart. Today, we will be stepping into the darkness of the most gruesome cases, where evil not only exists, but also leaves bloody and haunting traces. This is Real Gruesome Murder Cases, a series of true stories about murders that made the whole world shudder. If you are ready to face the cold truth and the gruesome corners of humanity, come with me to delve deeper into each case. A loving murder, content warning, assisted suicide, descriptions of violence, mentions of war, vulgar language. See, you all think I am about to say, I don't regret what I did. I just did it for fame. But what you don't know is that murder happens all the time under your pretty little noses. Your little gerbil was killed by your cat, and you don't condemn him. You know foxes are killing cute rabbits, and yet you give your kids stuffed foxes and call them sweet names. People do not murder. Animal instinct does. Men are full of it. Women just like to taste a bit. And in my case, I got drunk on that animal instinct. Part of that instinct is the fact that I do feel guilty. The poor guy had a family, a life, dreams, or something like that. I wish he didn't have to die. I do. But let's be honest. You aren't here to hear my life story. You are here to hear what actually happened. So let me fill you in. The fucker was cute. I can admit that much. He was charming, kind, sweet, and somewhat thoughtful too. He bought his girl some flowers at the Dolly Hop dance. They were apparently her favorite flowers too, the yellow roses that symbolize purity and growth. She laid one on his grave. I was court-ordered to attend, and I left a Black Dahlia. I killed him using some bleach powder. The awesome thing about being a woman is that you can stitch a lot of things into your dresses, little bows and ribbons, or even jewelry. My grandmother passed down this beautiful sterling silver capsule ring with a latch that lifted up the freshwater pearl to reveal a secret pocket for anything. She suggested a love note from that special someone. I didn't put in just a note. I put a little act of love in there. I knew the kid from school, biology, home ec, English, you name a class. He was in it with me. He seemed smart, sharp jawline, toned nose with little to no blackheads, pretty hair, basic brown eyes. He wore simple clothes, and there was nothing remarkable about the guy. He was a member of enough clubs that when a high school reunion happened a few years into the war, he could come back with his sweet honey and battle scars, shake a few hands, drink some bad beer, and then leave to go home to his picket fence and little baby. This never happened, though, because I killed him. It was around when we were getting draft cards. His number was called. He didn't want to go. I heard about him crying in the boys' locker room after PE. Those basic brown eyes went red, and everyone knew no class was that ruthless. His girl tried calming him down, but he put a couple dents in some lockers and stormed off. He brushed by me, apologizing for almost knocking me over, and gave me a look I will never forget, like I could help him if I tried. Very few knew I was a leader of many anti-war protests. War is horrible, but to everyone at this school, I was worse because I threatened to do something about how horrible it was. People just didn't know that I actually did anything. My bite matched my bark. I set off smoke bombs in the middle of busy streets, blocked roads to government buildings, worked other protests, or helped out literally anything that was against the war effort. I didn't just burn some draft cards. I used blank ones to light my candles. I caught the kid after a class, and I told the kid it was okay. I told him that his fear was justified, and his anger was too. I told him he could hide out with me in my basement, or we could injure him badly enough to not be able to go. But his eyes flashed with realization before I could finish. I will never forget what he said. It's either I die here or on the battlefield, and it's gonna be here. His eyes were cool and wide enough that they seemed almost black. I asked him what he meant. He said, I either die on the battlefield with strangers in a foreign land, or I die here, in my own clothes, on my own soil, and my friends get to see a body that isn't horribly mangled. We had never really spoken before, and I told him I didn't know what to do with that statement. He laughed and asked what he should do with the draft card. I proposed burning it. That was the first time I ever got high. While drugged up, you say shit that you never thought you would mean. A rolled-up draft card with pot on the inside was something I never thought I would do, so I guess the trend follows. I do think sober thoughts are drunk words. I say a bunch of shit drunk I would never say sober. But to be clear, my actions were while I was sober. I killed him stone cold sober. I digress. While high, he started telling me all about his family and how his little sister prayed that he wouldn't have to go to war and could stay at home with him. He made great pancakes and was the only one who could talk their mom off the ledge. He started rambling about Jesus and how he wouldn't want him to go out like this, but America was Jesus's baby or something, and that meant that dying for America was just as bad as suicide. I took a long, contemplative puff, and then I hit him with this. Just do it yourself then. If Jesus doesn't want you doing it to yourself, but dying for America is just as bad, then end it now. Less blood that way. A prettier casket. He took a puff, and I saw the lines on his face pull taut with thought. I could see him smile at the image of his sister, but that happiness burnt out at the thought of the death message. I wasn't being serious. Death was so close to all of us we mentioned it in one way or another. But the way he hunched over himself like he was already leaving me behind proved that he wanted out. He took another puff before he said, "All right," and started plotting. Now I want to make something very clear. I am not an angry person. The kid was just as enthusiastic about dying as you would be about planning a party while your parents were out of town. It was all up in the air until it wasn't. Until he caught my ring and said it could be a murder weapon. Said I could put some poison under the pearl and let loose when he least expected it. Until he kept making me promise I would kill him no matter how hard he begged otherwise. It was in the air until he wrote his notes, said his goodbyes, sold his shit, and made himself look like the loveliest boy you ever did meet. It was 3 days before he was supposed to leave. 4 months had passed since our first smoke session. We never talked about the plan again. I stayed up at night wondering what was the good thing to do, and if there was even a moral compass in this situation. But I knew what I had to do. We had a blood pact, me and this kid, and I never lie. It was only 3 days before he was supposed to leave. He was packing and invited me over to smoke, which happened more and more often over the course of those 4 months as that draft card started to rise from the ashes. I think his parents even thought I was his new girl or something because they invited me to dinner multiple times. The kid taught me how to roll that first smoke session, and I started to work my magic. I gave him 1 blunt, then 2. In the second one, right before I licked the seal, I popped open the freshwater pearl and let the powder fall like snow. I let him take a puff and turn up the music. He started coughing and choking, and at first he was smiling. A big smile, too. One of the ones I thought he had at breakfast with his sister over some syrupy pancakes. Then he realized this was it. I saw his dark brown eyes panic, searching for why, but then the recognition clicked. He started to go down and almost said something. He fell to the ground in one fell swoop. I always wondered what he said. I bet it would have been a thank you. If it were me, I would have cursed myself for being so damn loyal. The odd thing about being in a room with a dead person is that their eyes don't close. In all the movies and plays, their eyes close on their own, but I had to do that myself. I didn't want his mom to have to do it for me. I thought, already come this far, might as well go down swinging. I never thought I would be a murderer, but I also thought this country was for the best of them. This all might not make sense, and I don't really expect it to. It barely makes sense to me. I think I just knew people were going to die. He decided if he couldn't beat death, he would join him. I think even part of me thought I wouldn't get in trouble for it. Like God wasn't condemning these kids with guns, rather sending them food and movies and chicks, and maybe he would do the same for me. Your question is why I did it. Now I have a question for you. Why do you not kill all the foxes for eating the rabbits? Because that is how nature works. Well, war isn't natural, and yet to spend millions on it and make poor people give up their food and kids for it. War is egregiously human. You murder an entire country just because you wanted power. A power that, if it was natural, would be yours already. It made national news. People were all about the war effort at the time, and I was being interviewed by every news station in the country. Little Miss Peace and Love kills. Can you be a war vet if you only had a draft card and no Purple Heart? Smoke session gone political. The last one is my personal favorite. Now I sit here in a cell with a single notebook and dull pencil that I stole from the bathroom. Someone had left it for someone else, but I took it, and I'll pay for it later with whatever stale crackers I have left. The nation hates me. I have angry letters from thousands of people, but none of them, not a single one, is a veteran. I think that's interesting. I bet it's because deep down, people know that I did something good for someone, or they know that they would have done the same thing. I regret the fact that the kid had to die. I just don't regret that I did it. I think it was the kindest thing I have ever done in my life. At least he didn't have to close his dead buddy's eyes shut. Considering he asked me to kill him, he would have passed out from just touching some blood. His note. To whom it may concern, my dear family, I am so sorry that it had to be this way. I wish I could still hold your hands like I did when I was alive. She doesn't even know that I am writing this note. Patty Schreiner, I mean. She is innocent in all of this. Her hands might be far from clean, but so are mine. I didn't let her do it because I wanted to be far from you. It's because I wanted to be close to you. I was just so scared. I didn't want to be around kids my age in the morning, and then new ones who just got shipped over at night. I was terrified looking at that draft card. I couldn't go. I just couldn't. And I didn't want your last memory of me to be while I was riddled with bullet holes and gangrene in a foxhole writing a letter home about how much I missed you. I wanted your last memory to be of me sitting at the dinner table, all limbs intact. I'm still so sorry. Patty did it because I asked her to. I wanted to go. The day after I got the card in the mail, I even stole beers from our fridge and drank myself tipsy before school. I didn't think anything mattered. I knew Patty from school. She hated the war, and everyone thought she was a commie because she openly opposed the war effort. I thought she was a communist too. But once I got the draft card, I understood her anger, like I understand why humans need oxygen to survive. She caught me after class and said that she could hide me or something, but I didn't want to have the option to be physically alive, but dead to my country, or dead to my friends, or dead to you. I knew I would die on the battlefield. Dad, you always knew that I hated sports, or anything athletic, and I was no good on my own. I wanted to die with you guys, not on my own. Please forgive me for not wanting to die on my own. The day after I got my draft card and Patty offered me a way out, we got high. I was rambling about how suicide was a mortal sin, but going into a war I know would kill me was basically suicide, so it seems like I had no options. Then she followed my line of reasoning and said that I should just do it myself, like it was a lesser of two evils thing, and she was right. So we started plotting, high, mind you, and I was just talking out of nowhere. I said something about her ring and it being a surprise. I didn't want to chicken out and not go through with it, so I told her to let me have it when I least expected it. I am still expecting it, as I'm writing this. I just thought to get this done before she follows through with it. I don't know when it is going to happen, or how, or when, or even if it will, but I know we haven't spoken about it in about 5 weeks. I am supposed to leave for Nam in 2. We talk about how much I don't want to go, but nothing about the plan. I hope she didn't forget. I hope I do. I don't know what I want anymore. I can't live with the oldies crying about how I died for them. I will die because someone else killed me. Please think about that when Patty goes on the stand. And when you do remember, all I will be able to do from wherever I am is thank you for that. I love you. I love you. I love you. Please know that. I am sorry that I won't be at Sam's graduation, but I bet you will be stunning in the cap and gown. I love you more than I can say. What Patty did was because of me. Please don't hate her for it. Love, Simon. Enclosed in the note was a recipe for pancakes dedicated to his sister, written in blue ballpoint pen. Found you. Grandma is dying, but she has lived a long and good life. At the age of 97, she was in remarkably good shape until a cancer diagnosis 3 months ago. She made it clear from the start that she didn't want to fight it. No chemo, no radiation, no surgeries. Just keep me comfortable and let me die in my own home, was all she asked. My sister, Lori, and I were supposed to be taking turns staying with her in her house, but Lori works a lot. I am basically staying here full time. Fortunately, my job is a remote research position. Grandma was skeptical when I told her that I could work from home, or from her house, or wherever I happened to be. For her, a job is a place to go every day, not something you can do just by opening up your laptop. I set up a makeshift office at her dining room table. After working in silence for a few hours, I decide to check on Grandma. Sure enough, she is asleep in her room. I have noticed that she is sleeping more and has more episodes of confusion. Hospice comes by once a day to check her vitals, see if she needs more meds, and let us know how she is doing. I begin to think about my grandma's life, the life that is about to end. I need to think about that, about the obituary anyway. I begin making some notes. Born Annie Lee Morton in 1928 to Deborah and Leroy Morton, she grew up in Smith County. At the age of 16, she got a job at the snack counter of the old Songbird drugstore. It was there she met John Joseph Lane, or Jojo as everyone called him. They married in 1950 and welcomed a son in 1955. Mrs. Lane went on to move to Livingston. She began a job with the Renault Insurance Agency as a secretary in 1964, where she worked until her retirement in 2002. In her retirement, Mrs. Lane remained active with the local theater, as a library volunteer, and with local charities. Many in the community remember her warmly. She was preceded in death by her son, Jacob Lane, several years ago. She is survived by his daughters, Lori and Maddie Lane. I stare at the notes in front of me. I can't believe that is all there is. After 97 years, there should be more. I look out the window. The backyard is filled with dry brown leaves. My grandmother always kept everything so tidy, and the yard was no exception. Until the cancer, she raked those leaves herself. If she looks out her bedroom window, she will see how neglected the yard is, I think. I retrieve the rake from the backyard shed, and I think about the short obituary. The truth is that Grandma's life had one big black hole. It was the void left by her husband and my grandfather, John Joseph Lane, or Jojo as everyone called him. My dad died in a car accident when I was 9. I then developed a burning curiosity to find out everything about his life and his family. My mother had packed away most of my father's things. I looked through them and found them lacking in giving me any clue about who he really was. So, when I spent time with my grandma, I looked to her for information. I rummaged through my father's old room, and that was where I first found pictures of my dad's father, Jojo. Grandma always spoke highly of Jojo. He was a good father, a good husband. They were in love and happy. My dad, as a boy, had adored Jojo. What happened to him? I remembered asking Grandma. Did he die? She was in her 70s then, but had the face of a younger woman. Her smile faded away, and her eyes became serious. He left one day, she said. But where did he go? I pressed on. At the age of 9, I didn't understand the concept of separation, abandonment, or heartbreak. I don't know, honey. You see, he had lost his job, and we were struggling, she explained. Sometimes, I think he just, maybe went off somewhere and decided to disappear. I remember being shocked and horrified at the prospect. As a child, I didn't know that people could just vanish, except for kids who were stolen. But adults, never were they supposed to disappear. After that, I never asked any more pointed questions about Jojo, but sometimes Grandma would make a remark that would give me a snippet of information. His favorite meal was meatloaf with mashed potatoes, peas, and yeast rolls. He was a good dancer. When my grandma was pregnant, Jojo knew it was going to be a boy. He was so excited to have a son. Then he left when my dad was 8 years old. It made no sense. I had asked my mom about the whole situation later on. She just shrugged. According to my dad, he fell asleep one night, and the next morning Jojo was gone. I think of this as I rake the leaves into piles. I start at the perimeter of the yard, and I am working my way to the center. I am out of shape, and am starting to sweat in spite of the cool temperature. One last drag of the rake across the ground, and I am going to go in and rest. I cannot believe my 97-year-old grandmother raked these leaves. My thoughts are interrupted when I realize that the rake is stuck on something. I can't seem to pull it toward me, so I lift it up, and that is when I see that the rake is tangled with a leather strap. Bending down, pushing the leaves and grass away, I realize that the strap is connected to something that is buried. I pull harder on the strap, and I feel something give way, but it is deep. Retrieving a small garden trowel from the shed, I dig until I can make out the top of a leather bag. After a few minutes of pulling and digging, I get the item out. It is an old leather purse, stiff, scratched and caked with mud. The clasp on top is an old clasp, the kind with 2 metal pieces that wrap around each other and make a snap sound when they are forced closed. It is rusty, but after some effort, I manage to pry the purse open. Looking down into the black plastic lining, I see that the purse is empty, except for a bundle wrapped in wax paper. The paper is brittle when I unfold it. Inside, I find a large brown stained envelope, and within it another smaller envelope. I open it to find even more wax paper, and finally a thick bundle of folded notebook paper tied with string. I untie the string and open the paper. It seems to be a letter of some kind. The first page has only one sentence. "Dear Jojo, I am so sorry," is written in my grandma's precise cursive script. At that moment, I hear a car pull into the driveway in front of the house. The hospice aide is here. I feel panicked. I go into the house, stopping in the kitchen. For some reason, I feel as if no one should see me with these papers. I tuck everything underneath the kitchen sink before I open the front door to greet the hospice aide. Grandma wakes when we enter her bedroom. She is confused when she sees the aide put the blood pressure cuff around her upper arm. "What are you doing?" she snaps at the aide. The aide's name tag says Lavana. She smiles at my grandma. "I'm just checking on you, Miss Lane, just kicking the tires and looking under the hood." My grandma laughs. "I think my transmission is going," she says. We all laugh. "Maybe so, but your motor is still running, Grandma," I tell her. After Lavana has left, I put on the kettle and take some warm chamomile tea up to the bedroom, but Grandma has already gone back to sleep. It won't be long now, I think. I pull the papers out from under the sink. I look at that first page again. "Dear Jojo, I am so sorry." I flip to the next page to read on. My grandmother's handwriting was unmistakable. Date: Monday, November 25th, 1963. Jojo, you are gone. I know where you are, and I cannot tell anyone, and I cannot keep it in. So I will tell the pages. Only the pages will know. I will write this. I will bury it deep. Deep in the ground. Deep in me. Jojo lost his job 3 months ago. He was working for Wilhelm's Furniture. He had been there for years. But then the owner died and the place shut down, laid everyone off. At first we weren't worried. But then, when Jojo started trying to find work, he couldn't. No one was hiring. Not the factories, not the stores. Then, we got behind on rent. The landlord said he would work with us, but then the gas bill went unpaid and got turned off. It was getting colder. I dressed in layers. I dressed our boy in layers. I scraped together meals of salt and pepper and butter and rice. Finally, we got into a fight. I told Jojo. He was no kind of man, no kind of father, that couldn't even feed his child, couldn't even keep him warm. Jojo, I will never forget your face when you left that night. I looked up for a moment. So there had been an argument, but that hardly explained the fact that Jojo was never seen or heard from again. I flipped to the third page, hoping to find answers. Grandma had written this page later. Date: Wednesday, November 26th, 1963. Jojo, you came back. You left, but you came back, and you had money. A big wad of cash. It looked funny. It was smeared with something, and then I realized that it was blood, and you were bleeding from your side, but you said it was nothing. You told me to hide the money, use a bit of it to buy food and pay the gas bill and rent, but hide the rest. Then you said you had to leave. Jojo, you said you were going to go to our cave, the one we used to go to when we were courting. You would be back in a few days. If anyone asked, I was to say that you were out of town, looking for work, and that you would be back, but you never came back. Within the handwritten pages was a newspaper clipping. It was about a robbery of a tavern 2 counties away. I read the clipping carefully, suspecting what it had to do with Jojo. The headline was big and bold in all capital letters. Robbery gone wrong. 1 dead, money missing. Officials are still trying to piece together what happened at Big Al's Tavern on the night of November 23rd, 1963. The tavern was reportedly not very busy, and the last customer who left at midnight reported seeing the owner, Al Harvey, cleaning the counter as he usually did at closing time. The next morning, Big Al would be dead on the floor of the tavern, and a trail of blood led out the door. Unfortunately, it was impossible to track further because of heavy rain during the night and early morning hours. Eyewitness accounts state that a man in a red-checked shirt was seen running into the woods behind the tavern. So Jojo, desperate to provide for his family, had committed a robbery. It was almost heroic, but I couldn't push away the grim thought that he had somehow killed a man in the process. Looking down into the bundle of paper, I see another newspaper clipping. Big Al put up a fight. Sheriff Ernest Glenn stated in an interview that officers have been able to figure out what probably happened during the robbery at Big Al's Tavern on the fateful night of November 23rd, just one day after the assassination of our president. While the nation was in mourning, someone entered Big Al's just after closing to rob the tavern. Big Al was no pushover, however, and had other plans for the perpetrator. From the amount of blood spilled, it looked as if the unknown assailant was stabbed deeply, at least once. Unfortunately, Big Al was injured during the struggle and died of a head injury sustained when fell and hit the wooden bar top on the way down. Sheriff Glenn made this statement: "Wherever the assailant is, he will be looking for a hospital. He is going to have to get patched up somewhere. We will find him. It doesn't matter if Al died from the fall. We will be looking at murder charges." The next page was dated Friday, December 6th, 1963. It was written in Grandma's handwriting. "Dear Jojo, I went to the cave. I know you told me to wait, but I went to the cave where we used to go, where we spent so many hours talking with each other, loving each other. I found you there, my darling. At first I was relieved to see you, sitting against the wall. Then I saw the blood that had poured out of you, your eyes unseeing, your skin marble cold, and there you were in front of me, and gone at the same time. I will tell no one. I love you, and I will tell no one what you did or where you are. Goodbye, my love." After that, she had written one more thing: $5,576. I guess that must have been how much Jojo had gotten from the robbery. I was stunned. It was all here, the solution to our family mystery. Jojo had committed a robbery to keep his family fed and warm. A fight between him and owner of the business ensued. Jojo was seriously injured. The other man was killed in the struggle. Jojo managed to make it home, give Grandma the money, and take refuge in a cave, where he died of his injuries. Upstairs, I hear my grandma stirring. I hide the papers underneath the couch cushion and run upstairs. She is out of bed and so confused. I need to get to work. She tells me. "Where?" I ask. She is impatient with me. "The drugstore, silly. Who are you anyway?" "I'm your granddaughter, Maddie," I answer. She laughs. "I don't have a granddaughter. I'm only 18. I realize that her mind is somewhere back in time, before the tragedy of Jojo. "Do you have a boyfriend?" I ask slyly. Grandma smiles again. "His name is Jojo. He is so handsome. He takes me courting in the cave behind the old Myers farm sometimes. We can be alone there." Then the smile fades. "Where am I?" she asks. I tell her she is home and I help her back to the bed. That is the last time she speaks. Grandma dies the next night. I hide the letters at my own apartment and never tell anyone about them. It took me a few days looking through old property records to figure out where the old Myers farm had been. A mall sits there now, but it is long since closed and abandoned. The woods behind it are still intact. I waited for the weather to warm up and decided to hike out there. I found the cave. There was graffiti and a bit of trash near the entrance. Inside, it was dark and cool. It went deep into the side of the mountain. I had brought a long spool of fishing line, attached it to a tree outside, and unwound it as I walked deeper into the dark abyss. I didn't know how big it was, and I didn't want to lose my way. I moved my flashlight through the dark, and when I saw nothing, I kept walking. Then I noticed a shaft of sunlight coming through a crack in the rocks. I walked toward this light and found myself in a separate chamber. At first, I thought it was empty too. Then I spotted the still human figure sitting propped against a large boulder. The bones of Jojo Lane still sit. He still wears the black cowboy boots, the blue jeans, and red-checked button-up shirt he put on one morning in November of 1963. The skull grins and a skeletal hand is reaching out toward me. I kneel and look at the empty eye sockets. "Found you," I say. Jojo doesn't reply. I sit with my grandfather for a while. The cave is still. The sunlight begins to fade. I reach over to hold the skeletal hand. I think long and hard what to do. Should I alert the police? Should I make an anonymous report? Should I tell my sister and my mom? Then I realize I don't have to decide today. He has been here for decades. A few more years won't hurt. I will leave him alone for now. As I rise from the floor of the cave, I can almost feel him looking at me. I turn around, half expecting him to animate, to tell me not to go yet. The skeleton still sits, expecting nothing, asking nothing. I tell Jojo goodbye and turn to follow my fishing line through the dark cave and back into the present, leaving Jojo to sit where the past had left him. Bloodlust. I was going to kill a man tonight. That's why I went to the party. It was an extravagant black tie affair thrown on a warm, late summer evening at the end of July, hosted by none other than Walter Adler, the richest man in town. Midnight was approaching, and with it, my deadline. I dressed the part, wearing a maroon dress with a corset torso and a slit up the thigh. My makeup was reminiscent of the famous women in 1950s-era America. I was, as they say, dressed to kill. This particular estate had been blessed with a ballroom perfect for gatherings such as these. I was on the second floor of the Galant mansion, leaning over the rail of a balcony overhanging a bar in the center of the house. I was at my perch, an elegant nighthawk waiting for my prey. I surveyed the scene when a beguiling young man leaning against the bar caught my eye. He was an eye-catcher, that's for sure. It wasn't the extravagant, attention-seeking purple suit jacket unbuttoned on his chest that caught my eye, nor was it the loose black tie around his neck, the slicked-back umber-brown hair, or the toothpick used as a substitute for some form of nicotine between his teeth. It was the bloody knuckles, the immature carmine scar along his left arm, and the vague outline of a tattoo of a scorpion stinger barely visible along the back of his neckline. That's when I knew he was the one. He was described in his profile almost identically to how he appeared. His demeanor confirmed what we knew of his personality, that he was egomaniacal, vainglorious, but unfortunately charismatic, and believes himself to be philanthropic. He was ingenious, devilishly handsome, and beyond intriguing. Surely only he could be the target I was assigned. It was such a shame I was going to have to kill him. There are plenty of ways to murder someone without any comprehension of observation on their part. In order to properly take the life of someone as smart as this particular gentleman, the key is to get him to notice the oddities engraved in your actions while providing enough of a distraction that he chalks it up to a beautiful dame's unfortunate personality. This man was no half-wit, but he was young, attractive, and vain. So I deduced that an old-fashioned plan of seduction would work out beautifully, for me at least. I turned around and sauntered gallantly through the crowd of laughing and smiling wealthy people, all pretending to have not a care in the world. If their lives were really that easy, I'd be out of a job. I demanded my presence to be conceded to subtly and silently, as I smiled politely at those I walked past, muttering a few phrases of pardon along the way, all the while never taking my eyes off this mysterious, charming stranger. I made my way down the mahogany staircase and along the edge of the room absolutely packed with dancers. I managed to spot the bar at the very end of the room and strolled innocently towards it. I sat in the bar stool next to him, the curious stranger that had become my prey, and waited like a vampire in a doorway for just a few seconds before making direct eye contact. From this distance, he was even more of an engrossing sight. He had dark scruff resembling a goatee on his chin, perhaps a dozen small white scars along his hands, arms, and even one on his forehead, and he smelled vaguely of fire whiskey. Most of all, there was an impossible-to-miss look of a tormented wild beast hiding deep inside his eyes. After making it clear I was sizing him up, I gazed at his unbuttoned jacket and smiled. He started to look me up and down in response before smiling softly and shifting his body to face me while still charismatically leaning against the bar. He thought he was at the advantage point. Little did he know he was walking right into my trap. He was playing along beautifully, yet stupidly all at once. I had no time to waste. I reached out towards him, offering my hand while gazing playfully up into his tortured eyes. I asked delicately, "Care to dance?" He grinned while grabbing my hand and slipping me off of the stool. "What's the name, Toots?" I stepped closer to him, so we were breathing the same air. I became acutely aware of the fact that he was at least 5 inches taller than I was. "Does it matter what my name is, as long as we both have a good time?" He chuckled and grabbed me by the waist while leading me out onto the dance floor. "Fair enough, princess." I was guided by the small of my back to the center of the dance floor as a romantic song began to play. This unfortunate target of mine was a phenomenal dancer, pulling me close, then pushing me away, spinning me around, and then even going so far as to dip me downwards as he gazed into my eyes in a tease. Then he'd stand me on my feet and dance with me normally as if he hadn't just nearly, almost, kissed me, coming close, but not close enough. Worst of all, he had made me want it, which was a curse so unforgivable I could hardly stand it. Dancing with him felt like heaven, which distracted me more than I'd ever like to admit. I wanted him, when he was the last thing I should be wanting. I was on a mission. I don't feel things. I've never felt things, and I wasn't going to start now. But with him, I was a spider lily, blossoming in the moonlight. If only I had any clue what was really blooming that night. Perhaps I would have done things differently. If that were the case, maybe I wouldn't be dead. He spun me around, gracefully twirling me through a doorway into an empty library, away from the noise of the party. A nice, secluded area where no one could see us. We stopped our dance, and he smiled. "You're a good dancer." I beamed and glanced up at him. "You're not bad yourself." I put a hand on his chest, bit my lip teasingly as I stared into his dark, menacing eyes. "Would you like to go get some air?" He chuckled in response, and I pulled back away from him. Laughter was not the correct reaction. He was straying from my plan. With a smirk, he replied, "How forward of you, baby doll." We've truly been having such a delightful time. I regret to inform you, I'm going to have to kill you." He pulled me closer again by the waist, refusing to let me escape. I furrowed my brows and scowled. The audacity! Who does this insolent, sorry excuse of an enemy mafia's champion think he is? It was my job to kill him, not the other way around. I was going to damn well make sure he knew that. I grabbed him by the tie and pulled downward, forcing him to drop to my eye level. "Watch it, teddy bear. I saw my target first and I never miss." "Bold of you to assume you didn't catch my eye as soon as you walked into the room." He squeezed my waist, spun me around, and pulled me backwards so my back was flush against him, and whispered in my ear from over my shoulder, "Your organization is corrupt. You won't see us coming. The scorpions will strike to kill before you can blink. You're just one of many targets, darling. Don't flatter yourself by thinking you're anything special." His failed attempt at hurting my ego was adorable. I spun back around to face him and wrapped my hands together behind his neck. "You assume I'm one of them. You're either one of them or they started hiring harlots to do their dirty work." I rolled my eyes and scoffed, but he wasn't wrong. He simply saw through my plan. I grabbed his waist, taking my turn to pull him close and whisper in his ear, "You're handsome, but I'm afraid that's where the charm ends, dear. I'll be the one doing the killing tonight." With that, I unsheathed my dagger through the slit in my dress and held it up to his throat. I tried to slit it, but he held his arm up just in time and was barely preventing me from doing so. He used his legs to kick me in the stomach, and I kneeled over, allowing him to grab the dagger and pin me against the wall from behind. "You're enamoring, glamorous, and clever. I'll give you that. What you lack is the ability to anticipate someone just as enticing, charming, and intelligent as you working for the other side." I found his accusations laughable. With a chuckle and condescending smile, I retorted, "Once again, you're full of assumptions. I'm harder to read than you think. Also, how bold of you to think even for a moment we're anything alike. You'll never be as good as me. After all, I would have killed you by now if I was in your position." He grabbed my wrists, pinning them behind my back, and he dug the blade a centimeter into the back of my neck. I felt the cool rush of fresh blood trickle down and along my spine. "As good as you are at what, darling? This strange little game we play, juggling puppets and puppet masters, doing as we're told with no question under these false assumptions that we are making a name for ourselves, doing something praiseworthy, boosting our egos with the blood of our enemies. If we're playing this game, you have to lose to win. You and I are both losers, love." I used my entire body weight to shove into him with my torso, knocking the dagger out of his hands. "Would you quit with all of the nicknames?" I screamed as he twisted my wrists and pushed me harder against the wall in an attempt at pinning me. He started to breathe heavily in the struggle, but managed to say, "I would, if you'd give me your name." I kicked him hard over and over in an attempt to get him off of me. I practically screamed in frustration. "Ha, fair enough." He pulled us both backwards in a quick, jarring motion, shoved me to the floor as he let go of my wrists, brilliantly giving himself a few seconds of an advantage to bolt for the nearest open window overlooking the evening city lights. I propelled myself against the floor and jumped to my feet, turning to face him, still standing in the window. I didn't bother chasing after him. If he was going to jump out the window, pushing him wouldn't do him any harm, and it was too late to stop him at this point. So, I ran my hands through my hair and smiled. "You could always still join me, you know." In a moment, he turned to face the fight-stained room. He smirked as he gazed at me with those haunted, gorgeous eyes. "Sorry, sweetheart, but I'm not interested in your sorry excuse of a mafia. You're nothing but a cult of bastards worshipping Miss Scarlet LaRue, and believe me, she isn't worth the hustle. Until next time, save a dance for me, darling." With that, he fell backwards out the window, not in it for the money. I was a hacker for almost as long as I can remember. Even as a kid, I lived to mess around with computers, programming, writing and cracking codes, and surfing to the darkest edges of the internet. What I couldn't learn from manuals, chat rooms, message boards, or friends, I pretty much just figured out on my own. So early on, I knew that hacking would make me way more money than flipping burgers at Mickey D's, earning a college diploma, or even scoring a high-paying job on Wall Street, and with a lot less of the mess and stress that usually accompanies your average 9-to-5 gig. But it was never about money, and things have changed since then, which was why I'd retired. For obvious reasons, I can't tell you my name. And after you read this, you won't be able to trace it back to my IP address it was sent from, since I've developed and used a multi-level super encryption masking and scrubbing device to send this screed. So, why am I taking the risk of getting back into the game, stepping out of the shadows and into the grid by divulging this secret to the New York Times? Because of the way they've ruined it for all of us. I've had enough and just can't stomach it anymore. Who are they, you ask? In 2 words, today's hackers. These hackers today. They've no respect and are almost always in it only for the money. When I was in the hacking game, it was all about changing the world and making a difference. Sure, every now and then we'd line our own pockets a bit, with enough to cover expenses and then some. But for me, unlike them, it wasn't about the money. Maybe it's just the lone wolf versus mob mentality. Today's hackers are not only creating chaos, but they make no distinction of who it is directed toward. For them, there are no good or bad guys, only easy pickings. And because they do that, it reflects poorly upon our past and present hacker communities as a whole. It's their ransomware attacks that really piss off most of us legit hackers. Nowadays, the bigger their haul, the more likely these greed-fueled Robin Hoodish banditos will invest it in specialization and franchising. They've certainly gotten better at it over the years. Remember the Colonial Pipeline assault? It may have not been the most costly hack attack from 2021 to 2022. Only $4.4 million was made from that hack. But the downtime caused by lost business and revenue was far more financially damaging to them than the ransom size. The WannaCry virus was far bigger in the number of computers it infected, 300,000 plus, and resulted in $6 billion USD of damage, albeit the blackmail payout dollar size wasn't the top dollar in brides for that period. Well, I, for one, want to put a stop to it now. Here's a short list of today's greatest hacker hits. Coming in hot at number 1 for 2021 is the insurance company, Can Financial Corp, for a whopping $40 million, which was a record liberation money amount paid up to that point. The second was meat producer JBS's payment of $11 million US, followed by GPS system manufacturer Garmin for $10 million, an unidentified Austrian organization, $4.7 million, CWT Global Travel Services, $4.5, Brenntag, a chemical distributor, $4.4, Travelex, $2.3, resulting in the corporation's declared bankruptcy, fashion company Fat Face Ltd, $2.0, and then $1.14 million extorted from San Francisco's University of California. Do the math and tally it up. That's a grand total of nearly $85 million US. As 2022 began, so did more digital assaults, beginning with the FlexBooker data breach on January 3rd. the Red Cross charity organization was the next innocent victim. Then came Crypto.com, multiple Credit Suisse banks, universities, hospitals, and even the Costa Rican government. Now, with nearly 36 other major thefts occurring thus far in a year, with still 3 months to go, it's really getting out of hand, isn't it? When today's hackers set their sights on specific ransom amounts, they normally take into account several factors. 1. The size of the infected network. 2. The target's overall net worth, including revenue and clients' accounts held in escrow. 3. The plane of data sensitivity being breached. And that's the way they do it. It not only hurts organizations and businesses out there that put good into the world, but even reputable hackers such as me. Therefore, this really has to stop. And there's only one way to paralyze today's hackers dead in their tracks, to halt them from fermenting further mischief. So, what's a respectable hacker of yesteryear ever to do these days? Basically, the way I'd decided to deal with it is not stooping to their level. That was up until the day when I had this idea. We, the good guy hackers of yesterday, need to band together and go after all the bad guy hackers of today to fight fire with fire. In other words, globally, the good must unite with one another to go after these nefarious computer criminals to hit them where it'll hurt the most. We hack the bad guys. I've been developing a unique virus that'll infect their devices and which would A, identify offenders so the rest of the world could detect them and out these blackmailers, B, temporarily lock down their software until the threat's resolved, and C, permanently disable and damage beyond repair any hardware used by chronic repeat offenders to stop them and wipe out their access to easy cash flow. With every day that's passed, I got closer to my goal, to halt and hurt today's malicious hackers. And now, I feel I may have cracked that code to allow me access via a back door in all computers that'll leave those greedy bastards defenseless. I'm almost there. And come tomorrow, my friends, sweet revenge. Like Arnold Schwarzenegger in The Terminator, I'm back, the Breakfast Murder Club. A hush fell upon the gathering at the large clover-shaped mansion that Lucky the Lucky Charms leprechaun lived in. The guests looked in horror and sadness as they saw the body of the effusive leprechaun floating in the large clover-shaped pool that was located in the courtyard of the luxurious estate. Tony the Tiger, Toucan Sam, Count Chocula, Frankenberry, Buzz the Honey Nut Cheerios Bee, and Snap, Crackle, and Pop all stood silently staring at the corpse. While their first impulse was to consider it an accidental death by drowning, something about the mangled nature of the body didn't add up. Casting even further doubt on the death by drowning theory was the large metal blade protruding from Lucky's back, with blood flowing freely out of the wound and into the pool water. After a long and agonizing silence, Buzz was the first to speak. "Looks like we got ourselves a serial killer on our hands," he giggled. "Buzz, that's not fucking funny," Crackle yelled at the floating bee. "We have to figure out who did this." "Can we make sure he's really dead?" Snap inquired. "I mean, we don't know for sure, do we?" "I don't think he's alive." Toucan Sam flew over the pool to examine the corpse from above. "He's not breathing." He flew back to his room and retrieved a large life preserver shaped like a red Fruit Loop, then tossed it into the pool next to Lucky. But there was no movement from the leprechaun. "Come on, Lucky." The body still did not stir. "He's dead," Tony lamented. "But who would want to kill Lucky?" Count Chocula asked. "Lucky didn't have an enemy in the world." "Well, that's not totally true." Pop shook his head. "I can think of a few people who would have wanted to do away with Lucky." "Like who?" Frankenberry asked as he retrieved a pool skimmer and attempted to push Lucky's body toward the side of the pool for retrieval. Well, for starters, how about his children? Lucky had quite an estate, and lots of estranged children thanks to his fondness for Irish hookers. Those kids always chasing him in the commercials? They were his own offspring. They were always after his lucky child support payments. Yes, Lucky was loaded, Buzz blurted out. He had it all. Cash, stocks and bonds, Bitcoin and doubloons, pots of gold, Swiss bank accounts, and real estate investment boons. But I didn't see any kids come into this house today, Sam interjected. Or anyone else, for that matter. He paused. Let's face it, one of us is the killer. The rest of the mascots stood silent for a moment. Finally, Snap ventured a comment. So, which one of us would have had a motive to kill Lucky? We were all his friends, his most trusted buddies. We've all been through thick and thin together. Whether we work for Kellogg's or General Mills, we've all had the same goal of selling the world's children onto delicious, sugary cereal, so they don't end up with that bland, nutritious oatmeal their parents want them to eat. How could any of us stoop to something like this? Well, there's one mascot here I think could have done this, Sam proposed. He pointed at the Frosted Flakes guru. Tony. He's had it in for the beloved leprechaun for a long time. Hey, I wouldn't kill anybody, Tony protested. Oh, you wouldn't. Frankenberry sneered at the large cartoon tiger. Like you didn't make your displeasure known about Lucky's Asian safaris that you claim are decimating your kind, especially with your criminal history. Remember all those game hunters they found outside your house? Those maulings were expunged from my record. Tony frantically tried to steer the accusations elsewhere. It was probably the toucan who did it. That's right, Buzz agreed. Remember, Sam, how you threatened Lucky on social media and you had to put out a public apology before Kellogg's would let you appear in commercials again? Sam leapt to his own defense. Well, he was nasty to me, too. He said that Fruit Loops were nothing more than gay Cheerios. He should have been kicked off of Twitter, too. He's guilty, Tony exclaimed as the other mascots took a harsh eye to the toucan. Tony, Pop yelled at the tiger. This isn't one of your stupid commercials. Why do you always talk like that? I had a stroke, Tony declared. This is a total witch hunt, Sam screamed. If I killed Lucky, you think I'd just leave his body in the pool for everyone to find? I'm a fucking bird. I could easily take him anywhere to dispose of the evidence. He looked around at his accusers. It was probably Chocula. Lucky had the goods on him, and the Count knew it. The crowd gasped, turning to the chocolatey vampire, who backed away slowly from all of them, except for his ward, Frankenberry. I don't know what you're talking about. I did not do anything. Lucky did not have anything on me. Oh, yeah? Sam sneered at the Count. You knew that Lucky knew about your holdings in cocoa production companies operating in West Africa. Lucky knew that you were profiteering from child slave labor, using children to produce the chocolate used in your cereal. He was going to go to the papers about it, and he also knew about your little dalliances with European figures of royalty and your alleged ties to murderous East European strongmen like Vlad the Impaler and Ivan the Terrible. But what really made Lucky decide to come clean with everything he knew about you was a laptop he found in your castle, proving your involvement with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. You, sir, have a long and very bloody history, and Lucky was about to blow it all up for the world to see. That is why you killed him. You seriously did all of that? Snap gaped at Chocula. You should take a good hard look in whatever it is you vampires use instead of a mirror. I did not kill Lucky. the Count vigorously declared. "And all that stuff is also a lie. Lucky vanted to frame me because I was always his biggest competition for cereals with marshmallows shaped like weird crap in them." "I think we need to examine where the three little elves stand with all this," Frankenberry said. "Snap, crackle, and pop. Maybe one of you snapped, then another one of you cackled, and then the third of you popped." "Okay, what's our motive?" Pop asked belligerently. "Lucky and us go back many years. Us little guys gotta stick together, you know?" "Like you never had it in for the little leprechaun who works for your rival company," Buzz buzzed. "He always beat you in the little people's competitions at the breakfast conventions. Plus, his cereal always did better with children aged 6 to 18, especially in those from wealthier households." Snap sniffled. "Yes, he was our whimsical little rival. But that doesn't mean any of us would kill him. If it was anybody here who did it, it was probably the pink monstrosity standing over there." Frankenberry frowned as the crowd turned in his direction. "Me? Screw you, you little elf. I would never kill Lucky." "Oh, yeah?" Snap asserted. "Like you never got into Lucky's face about all the rumors he spread about you, about the name of your cereal meaning it contained genetically modified berries." Frankenberry shook his head sadly. "Yeah, I guess it did hit me below the belt when he told people that. My sales went down over 20% because of him. Also, Lucky did sleep with your wife," Chocula added. "She said sex with me was like sleeping with a corpse," Frankenberry cried. "Well, I can't help that. I'm made of corpses. The hell was she doing with that little Irish runt anyway? His pecker is probably the size of a matchstick." "Whoa, I think we best move on," Sam suggested. "Wait a minute. We never talked about Buzz. Our flying friend here had a very good motive to off our beloved leprechaun." "Okay, I see where this is going, but I am not the killer," Buzz screamed. "Yes, Lucky interfered with my efforts to spread awareness of the threat to honeybees. He'd go around saying horrible things about my people, that we're all dangerous, invasive species who sting people for fun. He kept showing everyone that damn Wu-Tang Clan video where the killer bees attack New York. He even tried to convince Michael Bay to produce an action or horror movie called Night of the Bumblebees. All because my cereal beats his among the 18 to 34 female demographic." "That's not the only reason," Sam insisted. "It's well known in the industry that Lucky also encouraged the worker bees in your hives to unionize. Apparently, work conditions at your company are so bad that many of your employees have jumped ship to work for Amazon and Walmart. I mean, God forbid you provide your employees with full dental." "What the hell do my bees need dental for?" Buzz countered. "They don't even have teeth." "Okay, enough," Crackle yelled. "This isn't getting us anywhere. It's clear that almost all of us had a motive to kill Lucky, but obviously only one of us actually did it. We have to start looking for clues. We need to check any video surveillance of the pool, examine Lucky's wounds, get an autopsy done, anything that might clue us in on how and when he died, and who was with him when he expired." No sooner did he finish talking than all the lights went out. The courtyard area was suddenly shrouded in darkness, with none of the mascots being able to see anything, despite some of them normally having excellent night vision. Then, only moments later, the lights came back on as quickly as they turned off. Everyone shrieked in horror as they saw Crackle laying on the ground, covered in blood and not moving. "Crackle!" Snap screamed. "Who did this to you?" "The killer has struck again!" Tony exclaimed. "We have to find out who did this!" Toucan yelled. "Everyone, follow my nose and stick together!" Suddenly a voice was heard from inside the house. "Ahem, everyone. If you'll turn your attention to me, I think I know the solution to this perplexing mystery." The gathering turned their heads to see the newcomer, Captain Crunch, emerge from the mansion and into the pool yard. "Captain!" Pop cheered. "What are you doing here?" "I came here earlier, saw what happened, and have been investigating the house ever since," the captain chuckled. "I've become quite adept at sleuthing ever since my court-martial from the Navy forced me into early retirement." "So, who was the killer?" Frankenberry asked. "And was it the same person who murdered Crackle just now?" Crunch took a whiff from his pipe. "Just calm down, and I will explain everything. First, here is an explanation of how it might have happened. How it might have happened. Tony did it," the captain announced, pointing at the shocked tiger in a fit of rage. Earlier today, he and Lucky were out by the poolside bar making chit-chat, and the conversation turned to health and nutrition. Tony repeatedly mocked the idea of marshmallows being considered a breakfast food, to which Lucky stated that marshmallows may not be a nutritious food, but that Tony was an endangered species and his mother was a whore. Tony immediately and swiftly murdered Lucky, inserted a knife into the body, and threw it into the pool to cover up the telltale slash wounds, and then bribed Buzz to kill the power using his stinger so that he could make an escape under cover of darkness. But when everyone gathered at the pool instead, Buzz had to sneak away in order to cut the electricity. Tony then took advantage of the darkness to kill Crackle, before the others could start searching and find out it was him who performed the dastardly deeds. "How dare you! It wasn't me!" Tony exclaimed. "Captain," Buzz belted out, "maybe you should stop with your bullshit detective work and go back to manning those glory holes or whatever else it is you did that got you kicked out of the Navy." Captain Crunch was undeterred. "Those are the facts, I'm afraid. As ugly as they may be, we have a double murderer and an accomplice amongst us right now." "You both are going to jail for this," Snap cried in between shedding tears for his lost companion. "The hell I am," Tony snarled as he bore his fangs belligerently. "You real deed." He leapt up and pounced onto the ground, roaring and throwing his claws aggressively at the other mascots. "You don't want to mess with the eye of this tiger," Buzz declared as he pointed his stinger at the crowd and prepared to dive bomb into them. "'Cause believe me, you won't be a survivor." "Well, this is all a fun little romp," Captain Crunch announced, just as the fracas was about to go into full drive. "But it isn't actually how it happened. How about this? How about this?" "Toucan Sam is the culprit," Captain Crunch proclaimed once the mascots were all at his attention again. Lucky was about to publish a memoir detailing Sam's troubled history as a cocaine addict. Sam was afraid the revelation would cause parents to boycott Fruit Loops and tank sales of his product. So he waited until Lucky was alone in the pool yard, then pecked him to death with that long, fruity beak of his. The rest of the mascots were shocked, but Sam did not attempt to deny the accusation. "Well, yes, Lucky did meet his end with me. But aren't you forgetting about your little part in this, oh Captain, my Captain?" When Captain Crunch did not respond, Sam was quick to continue. "When Captain Crunch arrived at the scene, I knew he would figure things out. So, I blackmailed him into covering up this crime by threatening to reveal to everyone his association with Jeffrey Epstein. So while we were all arguing back here, Crunch cut the power so that I could kill Crackle and take the heat off of myself for long enough to smuggle Lucky's body away from the house. But guess what, Captain? Our deal is off. You weren't supposed to reveal yourself in this manner, and now we're both fucked." "I too can. That is so," Captain Crunch proclaimed. There is indeed a lesson in all this. Blackmail and hidden secrets are tempting to use, but are as dangerous to their wielders as they are to their targets. But do not despair, Toucan, for that is also not how it happened. Here is the real solution to this mystery. What really happened? No one killed Lucky, the captain announced. In the interval before his body was discovered by you all, I conducted a thorough examination. Though it may look like foul play, his death was actually caused by drowning as a result of acute alcohol poisoning, brought about by his ethnicity, as well as his despondency over losing yet another child paternity case, this time to a Brooklyn mother of 4. The rest of the serial mascots murmured. But then why was the body still in the pool, with the knife in his back, when we found him? Frankenberry asked. Suddenly Crackle rose to his feet, brushing himself off as he laughed. Thank the captain's cunning for that one. He cackled as Captain Crunch glared at him with eyes wide open. Crackle, what the hell, man? You totally stuck the knife in my back. Give it a rest, Cap. You did that yourself. Crackle started licking up the ketchup he had covered himself with as part of the ruse. After the autopsy, Captain Crunch put the knife in Lucky's back and threw it into the pool to make the scene look like murder, sullying the reputation of the other serial mascots, enough to make people forget about his court-martial, which was hurting sales of Crunch Berries. I was in on the scheme as well, because he promised to help me convince the bigwigs at Kellogg's to bring back Rice Krispie Treats cereal, which we all know was the bomb. So I faked my death in order to make it look like a double homicide and allow Captain to declare himself a hero for solving the mystery. Plus, it would have allowed me to cash in on a very lucrative life insurance policy once I resurfaced under the brand name Rice Titties, the world's first pornographic cereal. Then why did you just blow it all right now? The captain seethed. You and I were gonna be rich beyond our wildest dreams. I had second thoughts lying down here just now. I realized that no one really wants boobs in their breakfast cereal. Crackle shrugged. So sue me. The rest of the mascots simply stood in silence for a moment. Captain Crunch decided to slip away quietly, to which no one else took notice. As the evening turned into full-on nighttime, they still stood in the pool yard without making a sound. Well, Buzz finally said, anyone want to go over to the Trix Rabbit's house? He texted me that he just made some brownies that are very much not for kids, for the love of murder. The wine glass shattered, and instantly conversations at the table came to a halt. There wasn't even a dull whisper to be heard, the silence utterly shocking. Nervous eye contact was made between the group until their attention was drawn elsewhere. His body was convulsing as foam began to form at the edge of his lips. The shock in his eyes left unchanged, while the pigment of his face turned from white to red, and then horrifically blue. "Somebody do something!" his wife shouted, gripping her husband's shoulders, then ravenously ripping at his shirt collar. The silence then broke, not into conversation, but the sounds of clattering utensils and chairs being pushed aside. 2 gentlemen rushed to the convulsing man and lowered him from his chair to the ground. The convulsing began to slow then, until it came to a stop, as did his breathing, as well as his heart. One of the gentlemen placed 2 delicate fingers on the side of the old man's neck, let out a long sign, and shook his head in remorse. His wife began to sob. Angelina sat motionless across from her father as he struggled to breathe, without even realizing what was happening. Is this one of his cruel jokes? Some way to make the night memorable in his own cynical way? Just hours ago, Angelina and her father were dancing together, him in a 3-piece suit, her in her wedding dress. Now he lays lifeless on the floor, blue in the face. Andrew is gathered with the other men. They whisper silently together, most likely deliberating on what to do with the body. Julia, her stepmother, lays upon her father's dead chest and heaves enough breath for them both. Angelina is still. She feels the hammering in her chest, the heat rising the nape of her neck. She is processing what is going on around her, on high alert. She doesn't have the capacity to be hysterical right now. Hysterics won't allow her to justify what has just happened before her very eyes. Her father was murdered. As the men gather in the corner, Angelina clears her throat. Every muscle in the room stops and turns in her direction. Andrew, do be a dear and gather Julia, please. She needn't be so hysterical considering she poisoned my father and her husband. Angelina said, so poised, as her chest breaks out into hives. Julia leaps upwards, crashing into the table and rattling the china. Her cheeks are streaked with thick black lines as she begins to scream. She lunges across the table where Angelina is sitting, forcing the gentlemen to leave their huddle and offer their assistance with subduing the events that are about to unfold. Angelina sits unscathed. You wretched brat! How dare you say those words and accuse me of such? I will not stand for this in my house, you unworthy fool. Julia's claims come in short stabs as she continues to struggle against the gentleman holding her back. Andrew's father, Leroy, attempts to calm the situation. Now, let us all take a breath. There is no need to point fingers or make such accusations. We do not know what happened, he says. With all due respect, Mr. Montgomery, my father was brutally murdered in front of my very own eyes, in his very own home, and the very day that was supposed to be my happiest, hisses Angelina. We shan't let anyone leave until they either confess or until we can bring the authorities in to decide for themselves. I, for one, know Julia has been pressuring father to update his will to denounce me as full beneficiary of his estate since Andrew and mine's engagement. Angelina is wild-eyed now. Her stoic demeanor during the events has dissolved into utter rage. Andrew makes his way to her side. Julia is being restrained by Andrew's brother and father. Her sobs have evolved into a low growl, wolf-like, ready to plunge for Angelina's neck. This is obviously a horrific event, one that cannot be rectified. As my wife is saying, I don't believe this to be pure coincidence or even an accident at that. We were all drinking the wine tonight, were we not? Andrew asks. The remaining guests look amongst each other and nod simultaneously. And yet none of us are exhibiting the effects that overcame Mr. Lawrence. Poison is not out of the question. Father, please alert the staff of what has happened. See to it they promptly head to town to alert the authorities of this situation. As for everyone else, please meet in the main room. We will gather there until further instruction. Andrew guides Angelina out of the dining area, away from her dead father lying on the floor just feet away. Julia couldn't have done this, he whispers so delicately into her ear. She doesn't have the brains to go about navigating poison. She'd end up dead herself before she pulled anything like this off. Angelina scoffs and whispers back, this is true, if she were working alone. In the main room, the 5 dinner guests gather. Leroy enters shortly after, out of breath, notifying the group that the stable hand has taken upon himself to ride to town to alert authorities. Henry, Andrew's brother, works to start a fire. Julia, with her now untamed hair and cranberry sauce-stained dress, finds a chair in the corner and begins to sob, less hysterically this time. Angelina and Andrew take to the main couch. Elizabeth, Angelina's cousin, rushes to sit beside her. What is going on? She whispers urgently to Angelina and Andrew, Their heads all bow together to keep their conversation low. "You don't really think he was poisoned, do you? That can't be. There's no way anyone would do such a thing, let alone to your father of all people. And tonight?" Elizabeth is trying to rationalize the events that transpired not even 25 minutes ago. A large part of her is feeling guilty for occupying most of her dinner conversation with Henry. How could she not, though, with those gorgeous eyes and seductive smile? The way he caressed her thigh during the first course. "Julia has to be behind this," Angelina whispers back to Elizabeth. "She's always been after Father's money, and now that Andrew and I are officially married, she wants the whole lot for herself." Angelina pinches the bridge of her nose, trying to gather her thoughts. "Had she been this desperate for the money, I would have relented. I'd rather have my father alive than his estate." Andrew takes her hand away from her face and entwines her fingers with his. "The authorities are on their way. We'll come to a resolution," he reassures her. Julia stirs from her spot in the corner. "Leroy, was that not your bottle of wine you shared with the rest of us tonight? How generous of you." The sarcasm comes off like a knife, and ever so slightly Leroy begins to perspire. Julia continues, "And did you not uncork the bottle yourself? A way of thanks for the marvelous and expensive night Mr. Lawrence threw for your son and now daughter. You took Mr. Lawrence's glass yourself to fill, denying the waitstaff." Everyone's attention turns to Leroy. "Yes, I did bring the wine, uncork the bottle, and pour Mr. Lawrence's glass, but I swear I did nothing of the sort to bring him any harm. I can assure you all that." Leroy dabs his face with a handkerchief. "Father would never do such a thing, Mrs. Lawrence," Henry interjects. "Absolutely not. What would be his motive?" Andrew is standing now, creating a barrier between Julia and his father. Ever so quietly, Elizabeth utters, "Unless the poison wasn't meant for Uncle." Andrew turns to face Elizabeth. "Elizabeth, what do you mean?" "Well, remembering now, it didn't seem like an issue at the time. I had come into the dining room first. All the glasses were askew in various heights. There was no reasoning for their placement. I took it upon myself to arrange the wine glasses from tallest to shortest, starting from the left side." She gasps and places a hand to her mouth. Her eyes widen with a realization. The glass I moved to Uncle's placemat was sitting at Andrew's seat. The room is still, quiet. No one says anything. No one engages in eye contact. As if everyone were looking at their own individual particle of dust on the ground, invested in everything else but each other. Where do their fingers turn when the victim of the incidents has entirely changed? The victim who is standing in the center of the room, his head bowed and hands on his hips, his potential murder amongst them. Angelina stands and makes her way to her groom. She takes his hands in hers and faces him towards her. She slightly strokes his cheek. "Darling, is there anyone you know of that would want to hurt you? Who would do this to you on our wedding night?" Exhausted, Andrew leans into her. He encircles her waist and embraces her. He lowers his head to rest on her shoulder and says in her ear, "I have no idea, but I am certain we are no longer safe here." Angelina gives a faint nod into him as her eyes scan the room. Elizabeth on the couch, Leroy leaning in the entryway to the main room, Henry standing by the flames watching them dance, and Julia staked in the corner, her face turned toward the window, watching her own reflection. She holds Andrew more closely. Her thoughts are broken as the stable-hand son comes running into the main room, the head maid behind him. Both are out of breath. One of the wait staff has stolen a horse from the stable, Mrs. Lawrence. I tried to stop her, I did. I told her no, she couldn't take him, but she did anyways. The stable hand's son exclaims, "He is barely the age of 10 years old." Who? Who took the horse? Angelina, breaking from Andrew and rushing towards the young boy. It was Priscilla. When we tried to stop her, she pulled out a knife, the maid adds. She must have been the one to put the poison in Andrew's cup, Elizabeth shouts. Yes, certainly, but why? What is the motive? Julia seems calmer now, adding to the conversation. Why would a young girl so full of life, from a humble family, poison a groom on his wedding day? Her head turns to face the group, her eyes narrow onto Andrew. Andrew, you don't even know Priscilla. Why would she target you? Questions Angelina. I haven't the slightest idea. Clearly, she is unwell to have done such a thing, something so drastic. Andrew replies, shock in his eyes. But the stable hand's son looks at Andrew confused. You do know her. I've seen you both together, late at night entering the stable. But you never take the horses out, and you always come back picking hay off each other. Julia breaks into her hysterics again, but instead of sobbing this time, she's uncontrollably laughing, liability and lingato. When the police forcibly entered 43-year-old Paulina Fiore's apartment, they found her lifeless body on the floor of the kitchen, covered in mysterious bruises. The lead detective immediately suspected homicide and ordered an autopsy. But after extensive analysis, the coroner concluded the cause of death was vitamin C deficiency. In a video appearing on social media, Stephanie Brolo, who sources confirm is a close friend of Paulina, is seen weeping and uttering, "This is all my fault." At the offices of my city's largest newspaper, I sip my third espresso of the morning and finish writing the story. 1 coffee per story is a good rule to live by. I wish I could teach this to new journalists, but they have their own ways of doing things. After I finish my third random fatality write-up of the morning, I announce, I'm sick of tabloid journalism, to the newsroom, to no one in particular. The young writers around me ignore me. In the economic downturn in traditional media, they are happy to simply hold a job. Giuseppe, our new chief editor, says articles with a topic of either sex or death receive 10 times more clicks than any other. The editorial concepts in his head are as blunt as the sales method of a fish seller in the market. I need to endure another month of ambulance chasing until I can focus on another piece of investigative journalism. My lengthy expose of government corruption last month, which filled half the front page of the print edition, received fewer views online than a weekend car crash or a nightclub brawl. Max? Giuseppe is standing in front of my desk. Why haven't you interviewed the friend yet? Friend? Friend of whom? Idiot. The "it's all my fault" friend. Young, attractive, trending online. Giuseppe says this with his voice rising in volume for each word. Stephanie Brolo. I show Giuseppe my memory, for detail is flawless. I didn't study political science to chase after friends of murder victims and suicides. Do it. He turns around and stomps off. Halfway across the newsroom, he turns back and shouts, Vitamin C. Focus on the vitamin C. Nutrition stories are good for our advertisers, Max. Several reporters type notes into their mobiles. Even an untrained eye can foresee them proposing all types of vitamin stories in tomorrow's news meeting. I dial the friend. This is Max Serafino. Is this Bianca? Yes, a female voice says, and hesitates. Are you with the police? Number I'm with the... I say the name of the newspaper. With a 137-year history, the name often opens doors. I thought the police would be the first to call. What do you want? The police in Italy would never bother with something as trivial as a comment on social media, unless a politician or celebrity was involved. I'd like to clarify what you said in the viral video on Italia app. I mention Italy's largest social media app. That video is ruining my life, Bianca says. I'm sorry to hear that. Well, everyone misunderstood what I said. I didn't have anything to do with Paulina's death. She stopped going out and looked thinner 6 months ago. Maybe I started her in this direction. She catches her breath. I only called her twice after she stopped seeing me. I should have tried harder, gone to her home. Yes? It's all too much, she says. Thanks for calling me, but sorry. I don't know who you are. Abruptly, the mobile screen turns red. She disconnects the WhatsApp call and goes offline. Good work on the Paulina interview. Giuseppe reaches over and picks up one of my antique pencils and massages it between his fingers. No problem, boss. I managed to knit the meager information I was given into a piece about a heartbroken friend and a substantial essay about eating disorders. Nice pencil. He studies the Castelli wooden pencil quixotically. Max, you are 10 years too old for this newsroom, but you are a cat that always lands on its feet. The Tiger of Turin, I propose. I'll accept that as a byline. An important-sounding moniker is the best I can hope for these days. I recall the Elysian days of being flown to Rome to interview government ministers, back when traditional newspapers collected all the advertising revenue instead of Google. When assigned a story, one of the first duties a beat reporter checks off is to contact the family members. I locate Paulina's father on social media and send an introduction. This is Max Serafino, a reporter with the Turin Register. I'm writing an article about the unfortunate incident with your daughter and would like to ensure I have all details correct. Please contact me at your earliest convenience. I receive a reply, which appears to be copied and pasted. We have nothing to say. Do not contact us again. The Fiore family. I move on to another breaking story, and the Paulina story goes quiet in the newsroom of the Turin Register for several days. Max, line 7! Someone shouts. I answer. City desk, Max Serafino. This is Paulina Fiore's father, a man says. Our daughter. It's all our fault. We saw how much time she was spending on her mobile and never stopped her. I'm sure it's not your fault, but I would like to hear more, I say. Is there a reason you decided to call me today? The police unlocked her phone and asked us questions about the websites she was looking at. Do you remember any of the names? I don't know. I've never heard of any of them, he said. But most of the articles were about diseases. Was she in contact with anyone? They did say she received the links from friends on the Italia app. Judging by reports from neighbors, Paulina has not been outside for months. The friends must be online ones. I call Professor Rizzo at the University of Turin. Could fear about disease, viruses, and bacteria, and so on, cause a patient to suffer from malnutrition? I ask. Mysophobia, commonly called germophobia, can cause a patient to avoid touching food, to eat with gloves, that sort of thing. In problem cases, it may cause patients to limit social interaction and avoid public places. Paulina appeared to be living on a diet of boiled pasta. That sounds possible, but I've never heard of malnutrition even in the most extreme cases of mysophobia. Hunger, including a desire for a mixed diet, is stronger than almost any other psychological urge. But isn't the urge to survive even stronger? I conjecture, trying to imagine what the existential threat could be. How could Paulina completely avoid something so widespread as vitamin C? I update the chief editor on my progress on the case. This has the workings of a good human interest story: food, fear, a female victim. Giuseppe looks satisfied. Keep digging, but steer clear from anything negative about Italia app. They deliver 30% of our incoming traffic. I am on speaking terms with many people in our city. People love to talk about themselves to someone who is actively listening, especially if they perceive them to be in a position of authority. After graduating university together, Bruno went on a different, more international path than I. Having worked for 15 years in Silicon Valley, he returned to our hometown and was soon snapped up by Italy's largest social media company. A glimpse at a life I could have lived. I canceled dinner with my girlfriend Gabriel to set up a cozy dinner with a 41-year-old man. On a clear, dry evening as dusk descends over Turin, as it sits in its valley between the towering Italian Alps on one side and the rolling hills that rise up from the Po River on the other, I walk toward the rectangular bulk of iron lattice that is the old Fiat factory in Lingotto on the south side of the city. The factory, almost a kilometer long, has transformed into offices and a ground floor shopping mall. Now it's popular with high-tech startups, many from America, France, and Germany. The building that was the epicenter of the city when Turin produced half the automobiles of Europe is now filled with people trying to figure out how to sell discount handbags through e-commerce. At least the people of Turin are no longer destined for a life of hard labor as previous generations were. Paulina lived not far from this building. At the Osteria del Fiat, I've asked for a quiet table. I'm disappointed when the host leads us to a very crowded dining room. We pass a large room with only one table of guests. In the circle of suited men, I recognize a retired local politician. In the dark recesses of the city, the power brokers don't like to be overheard. An hour later, after we have finished our own dinner, Bruno takes a large swig of the Dolcetto d'Alba we have been drinking. The obligatory pleasantries and the exchange of information about shared friends has been completed, and we can move on to the real meat of the dinner. I explain how Paulina had been accessing his employer's app over 50 times a day. At Italia app, we focus on returning traffic. Some readers we enchant with glamour, others we addict with fear. Isn't that manipulation? We are giving people what they want. If they want to hate, they will find it. If they want to love, they will find that too. What about promoting democracy and humanitarian values? That's just rhetoric for university students. You know that. Paulina Fiore died after gorging on fake news sent to her by Italia app. It's not our fault that someone can't handle online news. If we don't send it to them, someone else will. You have become very American in your thinking, I point out. It's disappointing my old friend can't see the world the same way we used to, but I've become resigned to accept people's differences, politically or otherwise. The police seem very interested in her social media history, I add. Bruno looks at me with renewed interest. Have the police opened an investigation? Maybe her death is not Italia app's fault. Maybe it's the people who write the fake news. If you can send me her browsing history, the one the police are going through, I'll take a look and put some spotlight on the fake news producers. That might keep you one step ahead in reacting to negative coverage. I'll keep your name out of it, of course. I'll think about it. Bruno focuses on his red wine glass. Bruno and I may not see eye to eye, but we have enough shared history to trust we will protect each other's best interests. The next afternoon, I receive Paulina's browsing history via an encrypted messaging app. I start clicking through the links. Italy's continuing flood of illegal immigrants. How COVID rises up through ventilation shafts. The 7 ways elevator buttons spread disease. Paparazzi capture pictures of Italy's first monkeypox patient. Vegetables in our supermarkets picked by immigrants inundated with monkeypox virus. I scan through months of links about deadly diseases and ways to avoid them. Fake news is a problem, and the government has been trying to combat it. In the thousands of links I scan through, my heart flutters as I spot our name. Don't trust what the government says about monkeypox. See attached articles from the Turin Register. Clicking the link, I see a list of familiar headlines. The dark hand behind the government reshuffle. Max Serafino. Patient malpractice allegations covered up by health authorities. Max Serafino. Pandemic recommendations. Misguided. Max Serafino. Corruption exposed in Turin government. Max Serafino. Other articles Paulina was reading, those not to trust doctors and government health advice, often link to articles written by me and my colleagues. I stare at the pencil that sits on my desk where Giuseppe left it earlier. Behind me, I hear someone approach and feel their hands on my shoulders. Giuseppe's voice says, "And you thought you were superior to all of us, didn't you?" Is it all? I am about to ask an obvious question, but stop myself. I have bills to pay and a scarcity of other work alternatives. I sweep pointless self-doubt from my mind. Journalists report the news. We do not generate it. With a click of the mouse, I bring up today's police bulletin and make proposals on which events we might cover for our prestigious 137-year-old newspaper to the chief editor. The next morning, a young journalist who normally sits beside me struts triumphantly through the newsroom greeting colleagues. Giuseppe gives him a thumbs up. I open the Turin Register's most viewed list, an online article. Clickbait news causes scurvy in Italy's auto capital is trending across the nation. I begin having regular dinners with Bruno. We talk about our old adventures in school and about the state of the country. Bruno reminds me that a political science professor in university had taught us, every industry is selling a product, and at its core, the news industry sells fear. In the coming months, the number of cases of malnutrition, similar to Paulina's snowball across the nation. I notice Bruno starts to eat more and more. I have lost my appetite. It's murder, sir. A scream. The sharp clatter of a dropped tea service. The sound of soft sobs. A rush of footsteps up the stairs. The sight of a dead body. And then, silence. It's murder, sir. P.C. Connors spoke. DCI Whitcomb eyed the constable wearily, sighing inwardly. He was tired already, and they had just arrived at the scene of a particularly bloody crime. For future reference, if we ever come across the body of an old lady sitting at her writing desk with a knife through her neck, let's take it as read that it's murder, Connors. D.C. Whitcomb sat in a chair and surveyed the room. Where is W.P.C. Sanders? I need her eyes up here. Whitcomb muttered the last sentence under his breath. He was a man who appreciated a woman on the police force, for she would often have a point of view that he would never see. She was certainly good at her job. She took excellent photographs, a new thing in police work. She also did a fine job with fingerprints, although Whitcomb had reservations about their usefulness. W.P.C. Sanders struggled through the door, laden with equipment. No one offered to assist her. She had learned not to ask. With brisk movements, she set up the equipment and started taking photographs. Whitcomb didn't need to be there for this. but he stayed anyway. Connors stood by the door, shifting from foot to foot. DC. Whitcomb sighed again, this time audibly. Connors, make yourself useful for once and gather the family downstairs, and make sure that blasted butler is there too. Whitcomb didn't like the fish-eyed butler at all. He looked suspicious. Why he looked suspicious was anyone's guess, but Whitcomb had taken an instant dislike to the man. Whitcomb poked around the old lady's room for a few minutes, taking mental notes and nodding his head a few times. Sanders carried on silently. She knew better than to interject her thoughts, but she also knew that she would be asked about her views on the case in due time. Satisfied, Whitcomb left the room, instructing Sanders to get a wriggle on and then meet him downstairs. Whitcomb tested the hallways and the stairs on his way down. Solid, every square inch. Anyone could creep about up here and not be heard, he mused. The old lady had 2 sons and 1 daughter, all of whom lived with their now deceased mother in the mansion. The 3 progeny were all sitting, and they seemed nervous to Whitcomb. Naturally, he thought. One of them is a killer. I need to interview all of you separately. Once I have finished, I will send you back in here. There is to be no conversing between yourselves until I have finished. PC Connors will be here to make sure that you abide by my directive. I say. One of the men stood up, a small frown on his face, and a rather large whiskey in his hand. The law, Whitcomb said severely, requires this, sir. The man sat down and said nothing more, but his face showed his displeasure. The woman scoffed, either at her brother's reaction or the DCI's statements. One just couldn't be sure. DCI Whitcomb pointed at the man who had stood up, gesturing for him to approach with the crook of his forefinger. You first, sir. The questioning went along normal, well-worn lines. Whitcomb saw no need to alter what had always worked. You found out where everyone was during the crime, you looked for corroboration, and you noted any strange behavior. The stories were distressingly similar. Not to put too fine a point on it, the stories were exact. Everyone was downstairs, eating breakfast, when the maid discovered the body. No one had seen their mother since 10 o'clock the night before. All retired to bed at roughly the same time, a little after midnight. The butler and the head housekeeper, a married couple who had worked for the murdered woman for over 30 years, retired to their rooms a little before midnight. All the door and windows had been shut and locked. DCI Whitcomb leaned back and sighed. He had had to deal with 2 murders in his 30-year career before this one, and they had been straightforward. The guilty parties had been easily nabbed, the evidence had been plentiful, and the convictions had been a foregone conclusion. He thought of the men who had been hanged because of his efforts. He could still see them swinging slightly from their final earthly judgment at the end of a rope. With a slight shudder, he returned to his task. It's a nasty business, sir. PC Connors spoke up. Once again, he was standing in a doorway, shifting from foot to foot nervously. Whitcomb looked at him with some slight irritation. The man had a positive talent for stating the obvious. Why don't you go get yourself a cuppa? See if the staff have anything to say about it all. Take your time, Connors. Maybe have a biscuit or 2, Whitcomb said. The sarcasm in his voice was completely lost on Connors. Connors lost no time in doing so. The detective chief inspector made him nervous at the best of times, but on this case, he seemed positively put out. Besides, he was feeling a bit peckish and could do with a nice cup of tea and a bite to eat. Well, he's good to have around when we need some muscle, WPC Sanders commented graciously. Ha! And that's all he's good for. Still, he's a good lad, Whitcomb said. Whitcomb winced at the thought of Connors becoming a detective chief inspector in the future. The man had no business running an investigation. WPC Sanders would be a far better candidate. But she was a woman, and she would not get the chance to advance beyond her current status. Whitcomb and Sanders went through the bedrooms of the siblings, and that of the butler and his wife as well, but success was limited. It would have been nice to find some bloody clothes tucked away somewhere. But this murderer wasn't as obliging as the other killers he had faced in his career. The evening was fast approaching on this October night. Soon the sun would disappear, and the night would be cold. It might even snow, Whitcomb thought. While he didn't relish the thought of being stranded here, he also didn't want to leave and allow a killer to escape. Whitcomb had the butler make up a bedroom for him. The man blinked rapidly behind his glasses and hesitated slightly before nodding and doing as he was told. Suspicious, Whitcomb thought again. Whitcomb sent the other two home, instructing Sanders to develop the photographs and bring them back early in the morning. Connors was to fill the car's tank with petrol and make sure the vehicle was equipped to deal with a tire puncture. Connor may not be a great copper, but he was good with cars. As he settled in for the night, Whitcomb thought of the suspects. They all had motive, and he knew that one of them had to be the murderer. The butler and his wife knew more than they were letting on, but they were guilty of no bigger a crime than loyalty to the family. The kitchen staff and maids were tight-lipped as well, but Whitcomb was sure that they knew nothing of the murder of old Mrs. Ainsley. Even the gardeners and the handymen had precious little to say about it all, probably because they had nothing of import to tell. Whitcomb sighed and turned out the light. Whitcomb was up early the next morning, well before the three Ainsley siblings. He wandered into the kitchen to see about getting a cup of tea. He found Connors there, chatting amiably with the cook and the maids. They all quickly scraped back their chairs and stood up when Whitcomb entered. Whitcomb waved his hand, gesturing for them to all sit down. He gave Connors an appreciative nod of the head. The man was not lazy, he thought. WPC Sanders is in the library, sir. She has those photographs, Connors said. Whitcomb patted him on the shoulder and told him to carry on, by which he meant that Connors should continue to have a chat and a cuppa, staying out of Whitcomb's way. WPC Sanders did not stand when Whitcomb entered the library. She was studying the panoply of photographs that she had laid out across the ventral table in an impressively large library. Whitcomb was slightly stunned at the sheer size of the room and the thousands of books it contained. Rich folk, he mused, lived much differently than he did. "Good morning, Dad," Sanders said as she continued to scan the photographs. "I am DCI Whitcomb when we're working, young lady. I am your loving and generous dad when we are off duty. You would do well to remember that," Whitcomb said with some asperity. He loved his daughter, but he didn't like that she had to see such a gruesome sight yesterday. It made him testy. He didn't like having to tell his wife that their daughter had seen a dead body. It made him testy. He didn't like that his daughter had to go home and tell her husband that she had seen more blood than anyone should have to see. It made him testy. "Sorry, Dad. DCI Whitcomb, sir." Sanders looked up and grinned at her father and her superior at work. She was not above a little needling. "Enough with the pleasantries. What do you see in these pictures?" Sanders stood up and directed Whitcomb to a set of photographs near her. "You can see that the old lady was killed at the desk. No blood trail, just splatters and spray. Except in this one area, very little blood." "So," Whitcomb said. "So, the killer cut through the jugular and the blood spurted on him," Sanders said. "Or her." "I don't think it was a woman," Sanders said. It takes some strength to get the knife completely through the neck. Whitcomb looked through the photographs and nodded. Let's sit down, have some tea, and go through the evidence, Whitcomb said. Righto, DCI Whitcomb, and maybe a biscuit. I'm famished, Sanders said. DC Connors was instructed not to interrupt the other two officers while they were locked away in the library. He was to continue the all-important work of chatting with the help. Connors nodded seriously and did as he was told. He was especially interested in chatting with the maid who had found old Mrs. Ainsley. She was young, pretty, and available. Your thoughts, Whitcomb started. William Ainsley, the eldest. He and his brother Rupert have a consulting business. Legal experts, they call themselves. They have a scrubby little office off of the high street, and they consult 2 times a week. They bring in less money than you pay me, Sanders said, grinning at her dad. The Queen pays you, he said. Right. South. They basically live off of their trust fund while living here for free. The daughter? Estella. She was married for 20 years. Husband died in a motor accident 3 years ago. She also has a trust fund. She also lives here for free. I have a feeling that the mother didn't want them here, Whitcomb said. Probably true. Look at these photographs. The mother didn't have a picture of any of her kids, but she has several of her late husband. The kids all have a picture of their mother. It's the exact same picture. Someone had copies made of a photograph, stuck them in nice silver frames, and hey presto, job done. One of them is a murderer. True. I plump for one of the boys, Dad. They have the muscle to carry it off. I'm not your dad right now. Also, whoever the killer is has bloody clothes to dispose of and a guilty conscience to assuage. Sanders nodded, then looked at her dad. She knew what was coming. Did you ask them? Whitcomb nodded. And? William claims that Rupert had to have done it. Rupert swears that Estella has a murderous streak in her and that she did it. Estella knows in her heart that William is the type to kill the old lady. Convenient, Sanders said. Quite. So, we need to find some bloody clothes. Maybe try to get one of the staff to tell us more than they have so far, Sanders said. A voice spoke from the entrance to the library. I don't reckon you'll find any bloody clothes, or the killer. Sanders and Whitcomb looked up, surprised. Surprise turned to amazement. DC Connors strode into the library and sat down, looking at his comrades. Explain yourself, Connors, Whitcomb said severely. He didn't like that Connor had come into the library unawares, and he especially didn't like what Connors said. Connors plopped a book on the table, leaned forward, and spoke. I was questioning that maid what saw the body. Jenny, you see? Strolling through the garden. I saw you 2 lovebirds. Sanders poked at Connors. Like I says, Connors continued unperturbed. I was asking her about this and that. Lovely girl. We're going to the cinema Sunday afternoon. That's her afternoon off. Connors. Be a good lad and act like a copper, Whitcomb said sternly. Right. So we get to talking about books. She has this cracking good book here, and she hands it to me. It's a murder mystery set on a train. The Oriental Express. The Orient Express, Sanders said, reading the title. That one, yeah. Anyway, what happened was, there's a murder on the train. Turns out all the people on the train had a hand in killing this bloke what killed a baby. This dandified detective figures it out. Frenchman, I think. Belgian, Whitcomb muttered. So there's the story. The book belongs to the family. Jenny tells me that all the kids read it. The butler, too. Okay, so we continue to walk. I find a burn pile near the gardener's cottages. I dig through it and find burnt clothes. I tell her I got to get back and tell you. So we start back. Well, soon as we leave, I spot a gardener stoking up that fire again. I rush back, but it's too late. Everything is ashes by now. Uh-huh. Continue, Whitcomb said softly. He had a sinking feeling in the pit of his stomach. Well, sir, then there's the lawyer chap. The what? The lawyer chappie for the old lady. The old lady called him on the blower and told him to step on down here on Wednesday. She wanted to substantially alternate her will. Alter. Yes, sir, that one. The kids all were there in the living room and they all heard the call to the lawyer chap. So did the butler. And then the kids all go to the library and shut the door. They're in there for a couple of hours. Which is strange, Jenny says, 'cause they don't really like each other all that much. South, that's that. Whitcomb and Sanders nodded, deep dejection on their faces. They were all in on it, including the help. Yes, sir. Jenny tells me the old lady was miserly and didn't pay them much at all, but the kids always gave them money to help them out. Jenny in on it too? Sanders asked. I reckon so, but I still like her. We're stepping out and don't try to stop me, Connors said determinedly. She's guilty of murder, Whitcomb said. I don't reckon she stuck the old lady, Connors said. She knows who did it, boy. I reckon I'm fine with that. I have to let you go then. I can't have a man on the force who knows wrongdoing and lets it go. Connors nodded. I'll work for my dad. Good money to be had in fixing automobiles. It all fit. Everyone colluded to kill the old lady. Everyone was guilty. Nothing, though, could be proven. The murderers were known, yet escaped the justice of the law. They did not escape karmic justice, however. Within a year, all of the siblings were dead. Both boys died from eating tainted fish paste. The woman fell down the stairs at the mansion and died of a broken neck. All of the deaths were suspicious, but nothing could be proven. Curiously, Jenny produced evidence in the form of letters from her father and her mother, a former scullery maid at the Ainsley residence, that showed she was the illegitimate daughter of the late Mr. Ainsley. These letters were produced a few days after the death of the last sibling. She inherited everything. Jenny and ex-PC Connors were married soon thereafter. DCY Whitcomb and WPC Sanders did not attend the wedding, of course. They did not care to consort with murderers. Ice driver. Zen Mirai nudged the right flight stick on his control unit, and the 15-ton asteroid chunk beneath his feet stopped rotating. A tap on the throttle, and the longitudinal thrusters pulsed, sending him and his payload towards the cargo rail, the 200-meter-long metal tube with dozens of meteor chunks harnessed to it. They had already caught a batch of about 90 tons of ice, and this would be the last of their haul on this shift. Status check, said Daw Artego through the local shortwave. He was sitting safe on Gopher 7, the bullet-shaped rail runner that pulled the cargo rail, a tiny vessel, less a spaceship than a spaceboat. His voice sounded tinny in Zen's spacesuit. Even though Zen had done this 1,000 times, sweat beaded his brow. Any extravehicular activity was dangerous, especially driving a rock. You needed a feather touch and patience. He remembered years ago a rookie named Cassie who had neither. Tired and bored, she thrust a rock too hard and wasn't paying attention. It rammed another one and damaged the cargo rail. That was bad enough, but she was caught between them and turned to paste. Add to that the fact the company cut corners to save pennies. He was still stuck using stone-aged, manually operated driving pylons, for example. Every shift, Daw would park their rail runner at a spot the survey team highlighted. Then Zen would have to suit up and jet over to a good rock. Next, he had to drill holes in it to insert the dozen 4-meter-long pylons, and then calibrate their thrusters, all by hand. Basically, his job was strapping jet engines to asteroids and then flying those asteroids close enough to the cargo rail so that he could harness them to it. After that, he got to disassemble everything, but at least from there on, the rail runner would pull their cargo. Legally, drivers weren't even supposed to actually ride the rocks, but it was the best way to react when something was inevitably misaligned. Endless room for error. Just bringing her in, Zen said. On top of all that, Zen was stressed because they were smuggling a platinum asteroid with the ice. He pushed the rock gently forward and fired reverse thrusters when it was in place. It was darker than the ice chunks, and if anyone looked up close, they would easily see it was a different kind of rock. But nobody did visual inspections. The economics just didn't work out, and so they'd gotten away with smuggling 12 of these right under their boss's nose. Here's to lucky 13 and an early retirement. It took Zen another 2 hours of work to harness the rock to the cargo rail, and another 2 to disassemble the driving pylons. All the while, he hoped this was the last time they had to do this. He pictured his wealthy future, well away from the frozen hellscape that is ice mining in the Canner asteroid belt, and he wondered if that future included Leah. He both did, and did not, want her there. By the time he passed through Gopher 7's airlock, he was trembling from fatigue. Daw floated towards him in the ship's zero-G atmosphere and handed him a celebration margarita. It was a rubber ball with a nipple, filled with cold water, fruit-flavored protein powder, and a dash of moonshine. "Any word from home?" asked Zen. "Nah," said Daw. "They quiet. Ain't confirmed the last 3 check-ins either." Check-ins were every 12 hours, so the ice hauler Coleridge, their ride, had been silent for nearly 2 days. Probably just interference from the belt. Daw's voice was confident, but he glanced to the side and frowned. The trip back to the Coleridge took them a day. All the while, comms remained quiet, and since Zen and Daw were at the end of a 2-week shift stuck with each other, they were fine being quiet too. They'd been driving a long time together, had learned each other's patterns, knew when to step up, when to step back. Friends were scarce in the belt. Zen decided he'd tell Leah. It was a risk, but they were good together, and he trusted her. Maybe he'd propose and make it official. He was so tired of this life, an endless cycle of brutal, dangerous work, and drugging himself stupid. Last time on leave, he went on a bender. He had vague memories of drunken partying with Eason, Leah's brother, memories of whoring and gambling, comforting memories of declaring he'd leave ice driving behind for good. And these declarations made the idea real, and uncomfortable memories that he might have let slip something about the platinum. But even if he did, nothing had come of it. And this was their last run. They were safe. They would make it. By the time they had visual contact with the Coleridge, a hemispherical head connected to a 6-kilometer-long tail, scores of asteroid rails protruding from it like the quills of a pine branch, they still hadn't heard anything on comms. "Maybe their comms are down," Dow said. "Maybe a rock hit something." It wasn't unheard of. The Canner Belt was relatively safe for a hostile work environment, but it did throw the occasional gift at you, and the Coleridge's point defense cannons weren't always positioned to slag it. "Maybe," Zen said, but he felt cold spread through his guts. The other 9 Gophers were already docked with their last rails, which meant the other 9 crews were already done their last shifts. Daw took them in, navigating to Gopher Bay 7. Normally they'd detach their rail and hook it to the Coleridge's tail, But since this was their last shift this run, there was no point. To stave off boredom and unease, Zen played around with the cameras, examining the massive Coleridge and her cargo. The field of dull space ice was worth a small fortune. Ice rocks were the main way of getting water on most of the stations in the system. Not that anyone outside the investors saw a real cut of the profit. Then Zen spotted something and frowned. "Check out camera 9. Daw complied. "What is that? We got guests?" An unfamiliar ship was docked with the Coleridge, sleek, narrow, and not broadcasting any ID. Zen swallowed. "Maybe," he said. They looked at each other. "You don't think," Daw said. He didn't have to finish the thought. Government auditors were their constant worry. They were rare this far out on the Canor belt, but an inspection based on a hot tip would explain the radio silence. "Nah, it's nothing," Zen said, faking confidence. Had he babbled to Eason about his platinum? Had someone overheard? Had someone tipped off the government about smugglers? "Maybe we should dump the cargo," Daw said. Zen turned to him. "What? How the hell will we explain that?" They couldn't run either. Gopher 7 depended on the Coleridge, and no doubt they'd been seen. It would be beyond suspicious if they tried to flee. Fine, Daw said. "We'll figure it out, or die trying." His response for pretty much any problem. "Worst case," Zen said, "we'll cut them in." Daw swallowed hard, and his lips drew tight, but he didn't say anything more and resumed docking. Nobody met them at the airlock, and they both let out breaths they didn't realize they were holding. No squad of Marines arresting them. No imperious auditor denouncing them for smuggling and treason, and 1,000 other things. Of course, things never actually looked like the movies, but the imagination did things when you were stressed. But they didn't see any of their crewmates either. "Nobody's responding on local comms," Daw said as they floated through the 0G corridors. "Think they got everyone rounded up? Doing individual interrogations?" "Interrogations?" Zen said. "This isn't some cheesy cop drama." "Yeah, well, maybe we should get our story straight anyway." Zen hesitated. He hated how much sense that made. "Yeah, fine." As they floated towards the command module, they began hashing out their story, each regretting they waited this long for the idea to occur to them. The unbelievable possibility that they were going to get caught was becoming more real with each heartbeat. When they came to a T-juncture in the corridor, they finally came upon some other people. 3 men floating towards them with purpose. Both groups of men startled and stopped, grabbing the railings that ran alongside each corridor to enable movement in 0G. When Zen saw the men were armed, he felt a jolt of panic. They were Marines, but then he saw their faces. 2 of them were vaguely familiar, people he'd seen somewhere once upon a time. The third, Eason? It was the only word he managed before the others raised their weapons and started shooting. A hail of pneumatic slivers tore into Daw, thrusting him backwards down the corridor and leaving trails of globular blood hanging in the air. He didn't even get a scream out as a sliver punctured his throat. Animal panic gripped Zen, and he pushed off Daw, flinging himself back the way he had come. "I got them!" Ison's voice shouted behind him. "Corridor 9B! 1 runner!" Not police then. Pirates. Zen grabbed the railings and propelled himself faster and faster, attaining a skull-cracking velocity. Behind him, he saw the 3 men spill into his corridor and fire. Ahead of him, he saw the juncture that would take him back to Gopher 7. When he neared the juncture, he grabbed the nearest railing with the aptitude only a career spacer developed and he wrenched himself into it. He strangled a scream as something in his left shoulder tore, not because he was hit by their fire, but because human shoulders just weren't designed for swinging a body at such speeds. His grip faltered, and he bounced down the corridor towards the airlock, rolling to avoid more injuries. Each bounce was a new bruise and a new opportunity to slow himself down and steer. He screamed out the voice command for the airlock to open. His pursuers were slower. By the time they rounded the corner and fired again, Zen sailed into the airlock. The razor slivers sliced through his right side and thigh, his blood blossoming in the air. He slammed the door shut before the next volley came. The pneumatic weapons were ideal for tearing through clothes and flesh, but were too weak to do any structural damage to ships, the perfect weapons for safely murdering in space. Their slivers bounced off the airlock door. Zen's right side was on fire, and his body and face were covered in his own blood, which was clouding in the air. "Come on, come on!" he shouted, starting the cycling process. Something thudded behind him, and he saw Isen's face through the airlock glass. He was snarling and banging on the door, probably saying something inane like, "Open the door." "Fat fucking chance," Zen muttered. When the airlock cycled and the door to the Gopher 7 opened, he floated through, holding his side. He hoped he wouldn't need stitches, but he feared he did. Either way, it would have to wait. It was just a matter of time for the pirates to breach the airlock. He floated into the pilot's seat, Daw's seat, and shotgunned through undocking. Something shuddered, and he heard the deep wail of metal bending and breaking. He was licensed to fly, but as a backup for Daw, he rarely did, and probably forgot something. The checklists didn't cover fleeing from pirates anyway. Regardless, Gopher 7 didn't report any critical errors. Good enough. He lit up the thrusters and put some distance between himself and the Coleridge. But where would he go? He could outrun the Coleridge, and he had a head start on the other Gophers. But Isen's ship was a real starship, not a glorified cargo truck. He decided to dive into the canner belt itself, banking on Isen's pilot not being familiar with flying through rocks, banking on being familiar enough himself. Then an alarm trilled and his console flashed red. It was the friendly fire warning, in case the Coleridge ever accidentally aimed its point defense cannons at one of the Gophers. Only this time, it wasn't accidental. "Shit," Zen said. The whole ship rocked as the slugs tore through it, and he was knocked out when he hit his head. Zen's first thoughts were about making sure Daw was fine. Concussions were serious, and this wasn't just professional diligence. Daw was his friend. It took him a while to extricate himself from his seat, and by then he remembered that Daw wasn't there, that he saw Daw get murdered. Zen ran his hands over his face. "Shit," he whispered. Daw was dead. He felt cold inside, and he didn't really know why. This line of work claimed people all the time. A ship like the Coleridge might have upwards of 10 fatalities a year. But losing Daw was different. They'd been running this drive for nearly 11 years. They had a retirement plan. They'd leave this crap hole of a system, find a planet to live on. And now, poof, just like Cassie, they got careless, and the whole thing got flattened. And if the pirates were on the Coleridge and comms were down, the rest of the crew were probably dead too. Zen wondered if he really was the only one still alive. When he checked his right side, it was sticky with clotted blood. Stiff, sore, but he hadn't bled out. Lucky day. His hands hurt. His everything hurt. With trembling fingers, he tapped Gopher 7's cracked interface, trying to get an idea of what happened, of how much trouble he was in. He wasn't dead yet, and if there was a chance of making it out, he damn well was going to take it. Find a way to mourn the others properly. And maybe, just maybe, a spark of anger warmed his heart. Parts of the ship reported no atmosphere, so the hull was breached. The engine was gone, shredded by the cannons. The cargo rail was missing. He figured their asteroid haul had given him enough cover to avoid getting slagged entirely. Small mercy. He was stranded, but maybe he could do something unconventional with the maneuvering pylons, if any survived. And his radio still worked. That was good. But he was also deep in the Canner belt, so it was unlikely anyone would be able to hear him. Floating through the belt and out the other side was about his only option. A couple weeks, if he was lucky and didn't collide with a rock. Then he could signal for help, and maybe in another couple of weeks, someone would pick him up. If he stretched his supplies, he had the food to survive that long. But the cannons had also clipped Gopher 7's water tanks, so all he had left was what was already in the pipes, maybe a day's worth. Zen sat back in his chair, groaned, and stared out at the Canor belt all around him. An ocean of frozen water, as poisonous as the seas of old Earth if not purified. Not something Gopher 7 was equipped for, not something Zen was schooled in. Zen chuckled. We'll figure it out, or die trying. The Dark Files of Lazarus, case number 13. Lazarus, the city built upon the ashes of Los Angeles, has irony in mounds as high as the carbon steel coins piling up in the newly formed vaults. Theo Baxton was the 13th child born into this city after its establishment. Blessed at birth, cursed at life. Again, the irony piles on. Superstitions aside, young Theo had the average childhood of those in the city. A busy father, a mother who stayed at home making a side business for her personal hobbies, schools located on the outskirts as a means to accommodate all from different walks of life, rival gangs that start between said schools and end up either inside of the city or inside the ground. Theo was no exception. He was branded to the Cater Kings, a gang that sought to make money between other gangs as an intermediate and peacekeeping family. Fees were issued to them to end turf wars before they started, a fair sum of carbon steel coins and fruit seeds that could also be traded in for food and weaponry. Young Theo was trained as the accountant of the group, having excelled in his classes of mathematics. In fact, given his devotion to the numbers, he was also allowed to freelance between the gangs. Word would spread throughout Lazarus of the boy genius with a fist in fights and a hand in banks, and he had his own office flat amongst the perks of a local celebrity. This climb would continue for 3 years until the peace was finally shattered. A third world war was an ongoing rumor even in this decade, but the threat of such was a temptation that could no longer be ignored. The federal government, trying to keep its iron hand upon the nation's throat. At the same time, groups of states were seceding from the Union, starting with Texas and Florida. California was arguing its points to secede despite being government central for years. Tensions were high everywhere, and all it would take was one little push. According to an associate of Theo, who wished to remain anonymous, a letter with no return address and a waxed seal pressed with an emblem of a serpent eating its own tail. Inside, Theo told his associate that it was from someone named Enzo, asking for help to what was described as a complicated accounting error. Despite Theo's policy to only work with people within the city, the letter promised a large reward, $50 million in carbon steel, with an extra $5 million sent to him as an incentive. All he had to do was leave his answer outside of his door by the second day of receiving the letter. The answer was yes. On the fourth day, the associate stated that a large sum of carbon steel was made to Theo's personal vault, The bankers, however, refused to divulge information at the time according to their privacy policies, and insisted that since no amount of money was stolen or missing, that this was just another paycheck for Mr. Baxton. Come the afternoon, a large box was delivered to Theo's office containing paperwork and USBs pertaining to the error mentioned in the letter from Enzo. Theo did examinations and cross-examinations, contacted different businesses, and even got in touch with several tax collectors. Apparently, several different accounts belonging to key figures within the city gangs were seized, and the paperwork of each were sent to the wrong people in authority, all of which were dismissed under negligence. Now, no longer needing any trials, the figures could get their money back, but the public servants refused to be involved with the returns. Instead, Theo was contacted as a representative of the Cater Kings to oversee the return of the physical funds. The associate then told of what happened over the next few weeks. Delivery trucks containing wooden boxes of the promised funds were driven to the outskirts of Lazarus, where the gangs of the prominent figureheads awaited to take to the vaults. Personally, the associate noted two things that were strange. All the truck drivers wore masks, and all the boxes were locked with their designated keys back at the vaults, awaiting in the hands and granted access only by the bank personnel. Still, the gangs were happy to have their money back, and they praised Theo and the Cater Kings as heroes. The associate refused to answer any more questions, as he had pled the fifth with great tremoring. He was excused and escorted back to his home. The rest of the case was a jigsaw of events relayed by the media that left Lazarus with blood in the streets, controversies and conspiracies, and many unanswered questions. Several stores and storage facilities of fruit seeds were set ablaze over a course of 9 days. A week later, large crowds were running at large around the streets, whilst throwing glass bottles and broken pieces of concrete at vehicles and buildings. Citizens were set in a panic as droves of gang members washed upon them like a furious flood. The local police had to team up with the city's firefighters to stem the flow of violence, but they were outnumbered and could only give way yard by yard. The hospitals were soon filled to capacity with victims of the assaults, several of which were fatal. What caused this outburst? It turned out that it had to do with a bounty of 10 million carbon steel coins for the capture of Theo Baxton, with double if caught alive. Apparently, one of the heads of the gangs issued the order not long after the delivery of the boxes to the banks. A call was made from the bank once the packages were opened, citing fraud via forgery and non-delivery of goods, followed by a plea for help against an all-out mob assault. The police noted that none of the perpetrators used any weapons outside of the bank's own supplies, from chairs to pens and even magazines, with hysterical employees reporting threats against the traitor, the embezzling rat, with maledictions attached. Theo himself was unable to be reached, for he was no longer in Lazarus. Another of his associates, before dying of his wounds in one of the hospitals mentioned earlier, only uttered this: "Had to get him out. He, not in the wrong, framed. Got him out to a friend. Gotta find Enzo." The assessment by the city's detectives were as followed. Theo was made aware of the goods inside of the containers, which turned out to be lead bars. He was made to lay low as the Cater Kings tried once more to keep the peace. The turmoil was spiraling off the rails, and the Kings were placed in the spotlight. The head of the Cater Kings, who also remains anonymous, promised the others that he would provide them with the guilty party members, i.e., he was going to offer Theo up as a sacrifice. Theo was made aware of this by one or more of his associates, official or on the outside yet on his payroll, and had to arrange for departure. Then came the arson, and that pushed everyone over the edge in desperation, especially with the bounty issued and made public despite the denial of the gang leaders giving such an outcry. Theo and company had to fight their way out of his flat and office to the getaway vehicle, which had to blow through pockets of people, as obtained from the records of different doctors overseeing patients who were all victims to the same speeding car that bowled them onto the streets. All good things must come to an end, and for a young man with a talent for numbers, it was almost curtains. About 900 people were admitted to the hospitals, with 88 losing their lives. Amongst the lost were 13 cops, 15 firefighters, 9 store owners, and a mixture of citizens and gang members. In the aftermath of one of the darkest moments of Lazarus, the questions still rebound about the roads and haunts. Who was Enzo? Who really sent the bounty, if not any of the gang leaders? Where was the money? Where is Theo Baxton? Until the young accountant is apprehended, no one knows. There is doubt that even he will know. Authorities are looking as far as the coastlines, but so are many a gang member, with the Cater Kings intent on making good of their promise. Once, a city of angels was promised. Now, a den of devils has been erected, and it calls out for nothing less than vengeance, Tokyo smoke. Possible triggers: intimidation, slight, mention of drugs, and trial. She flicked the wheel of the lighter. Sparks shot up, followed by a small flame which she held to the end of the cigarette dangling from between her lips. Talk. You've got about 5 minutes to convince me to let you live. In that case, mind if I have a cigarette too? That's executioner etiquette, isn't it? Or is that just Hollywood? Just Hollywood, she said, but offered me her pack of cigarettes with her free hand just the same. Her other hand, the one hidden from view inside her jacket, pointed a gun at me. Not of the Hollywood variety. This was a Nambu M57. It would get the job done. Time's ticking. She pulled back the hammer for emphasis. The clicking sent a shiver through my entire being, commanding every single hair to stand at attention. Would you believe me if I said I did it because I love you? I asked, a futile attempt at lightening the mood. The strange thing, though, was that I meant it. Even then, as I looked at her, knowing full well she'd kill me once the smoldering tip of her cigarette reached the filter. Really, Takashi, you did it because you love me. My dad is in jail, Mom's awaiting trial for complicity, and Itsuki is awaiting whether he'll be behind bars for 5 years or 27. I thought you liked Itsuki. I did. But you didn't, I said, while I tried to light the cigarette I kept in the corner of my mouth. It was true. Although I didn't like him at first, he became much like a brother rather than just an in-law after we got married. I didn't look at her as I said it. I was staring at the graffiti frog that had made its appearance on the wall across the train tracks 2 weeks ago. But I knew the face she was giving me. I remembered every line that appeared on her usually smooth skin. You always complained about how he badmouths you to your dad at every opportunity he got. It's the only reason he was going to take over the company. You're smarter, more experienced, and more ambitious than he was or ever would be. It should have been you, and you know it. As for your Stop. As for your dad, Hina, he chewed it up, I continued. All of it. She poked me with the barrel of the gun to let me know who was in charge here. That's no reason to have them locked up. True, it wasn't, but it was convenient. For years, even before we got married, she had been complaining about all of them. Her dad most of all. Ever since she was a little girl, she had been preparing to take over her father's company when eventually the time would come. She made sure she got the best grades all throughout primary and middle school. Even at university, she had always been at the top of her class, while on the weekend, she inspected contracts for business deals and saved the company millions by spotting hidden clauses. But none of that mattered. Once Itsuki was born, he was all her dad had cared about. I took a deep drag of my cigarette. Marlboro Gold. I always hated lights. They miss that slight scratching sensation when you inhale. Isn't it though? 5 years ago, during Christmas, when your dad announced that Itsuki would take over your position as CEO, you said you never wanted to see any of them ever again. I didn't mean that. Then you didn't mean it either when you repeated it after he gave you the opportunity to develop your skills elsewhere, for your birthday, I suppose? She was angrily fingering her cigarette, flicking of ash that wasn't there. I could only hope she was a little more careful with the trigger. I still had 3 minutes left after all. Mind if I get something from the vending machine? I asked. Last meal and all that. I got up before she could give me an answer and walked over to the overpriced candy dispenser. I fumbled in my pocket for my wallet that wasn't there. Can I borrow a 500 yen piece, hun? She didn't move, just raised an eyebrow. Fine. I looked around, but of course there was nobody around at this hour. The parking lot was empty, but for 4 cars. I turned a quarter turn and forced my elbow through the glass. Ah, motherfucker. That looks a lot less painful in the movies. I took 3 packs of Pocky from the machine, careful not to cut my hand on the sharp edges. Strawberry, matcha, and the regular ones. I wasn't sure which ones you liked best. I thought strawberry, but it could have been matcha as well. Anyway, here's both, I said, and sat back down on the hood of my beat-up Honda Odyssey. She didn't try to take any when I offered the box to her. Just took another drag of her cigarette, which was reaching the halfway mark by now. I always liked the original best myself. I took a drag of my own cigarette before taking it from my mouth and taking a bite of 4 of the chocolate-covered sticks at once. Disgusting. I still don't get it. How can you eat and smoke at the same time? I lifted my shoulders in answer and swallowed before blowing out the smoke I'd been holding up in the air to be carried off by the wind. I never had a problem with eating and smoking at the same time. I knew many people who did, though. Back to what I was saying, I did it for us. In return for the evidence about the shipments of cocaine I gave to Nisanto Corp., they offered me 1 billion yen. 1 billion hina. You'd be rid of your family. We could both quit our jobs and move somewhere else. We'd never have to work again. Tell me that doesn't sound like a dream. You wouldn't have to teach at the high school anymore. No more overtime and compulsory socializing with colleagues. Isn't that what you always wanted? Not like this. They are still my family. And how do you think this will look for me? With my family name ruined? I'll be seen as the daughter of some drugs cartel. My parents weren't like that. They didn't even know about it. The arms of the gold-plated station clock twitched. 10:35. The dial was beautifully decorated with the image of a sun that, in the morning, reflected the sunlight so brilliantly that it seemed to shine itself. Now it was barely visible at all. True, that was on Itsuki, but none of that would have happened if you'd been in charge. Besides, your dad will be out in, 3 years? Your mom's sentence will be even shorter. I doubt she'll even have to do any jail time at all. You just don't fucking get it, do you? You think that's the story the media is going to run with? That it was just my brother, and the rest of us had nothing to do with it? Sure, I might not be seen as an accomplice, but I'm part of that family. You didn't ruin just them. You ruined all of us. Honestly, I didn't get it. Maybe it was because I'd never been close to my own family, or just because we were rich now and could go wherever we wanted. You took my last name when we married. No one will associate you with them once we move somewhere else. Where do you want to go? Osaka, or maybe Kochi? You always loved the beach. Hell, we could even go to Europe. You pick a country, and we'll be on the next flight. My eyes were fixed on the entrance of the empty train station. One of the lights illuminating the statue a little to the left of the gates was flickering and drew my attention. It was a statue of a man, but I didn't recognize him. Over the past 6 years I'd been coming here, I'd never taken the time to read the plaque. "You've got about 1 minute left," she said, inspecting the cigarette clutched between her fingers. "I've got to say, you're doing a real bang-up job so far." The gun was still pressed in my side, but it didn't scare me as much anymore. It was just there. "What would you like me to say? That I'll buy you the most beautiful jewelry, a nice car, a big house with a pool? We can have all that if you want, but you already know that." She let another gray cloud escape from her mouth as she nodded. Then she turned to look at me and gave me another look. "Go on." "We could have kids, a boat." She scoffed. "Really? You think having kids will fix this?" "We tried having kids, remember? It didn't exactly work." "We could always adopt them. You used to dream of having a boy and a girl. The boy had to be older, you always said. If we adopt them, you can make sure we get that." She let out a deep sigh. "It's almost time, Takashi. Anything you want to say, I suggest you say it now." I took a drag of my cigarette as I thought it over. Your last words are hard to come up with on the spot. I took another drag while staring at the statue again. Who is the statue of? Takashi? Her tone was annoyed more than angry. She prodded me with the gun once more. Yeah, I'm thinking about it." I looked back at her. Her eyes didn't have any emotion left in them. No love, no anger, no sadness. "I still love you. I'd want those to be my last words. I still love you," I repeated. She shook her head. Then, right as she shot away the still smoldering cigarette butt, the 10:38 train drove into the station. I took a final drag of my cigarette and shot the butt ahead of me. "That's my cue, sayonara. Just ask for mercy." It's a tricky section of the garden, shaded and north-facing, but the foliage thrives under my watchful eye. I ensure it grows lush and verdant, and only I can coax it from sulking in this hot, dry weather. I'm pleased to see the blue-green tones of Siboldiana flourishing beside the golden variegated undulates leaves. I'm outraged by the pockmarked damage I've discovered and search for the culprit amongst the ovate leaves. There, a snail clings to the underside of a leaf, sucked close in a non-consensual and greedy kiss. I prise it off, and the shell implodes in my pincer grip, crushed mush oozing between my fingertips. I discard the muck onto the soil with disdain, satisfied that feeder has now become food. A gardener must be brutal, constantly battling soft-bodied grubs, mandible-fanged pests, plagues of aphids and creeping insidious blight, all in order to protect the precious shoots and trembling new leaves. She must also have a hard, calculating heart to destroy what was previously nurtured, cutting back and curbing life when the time comes, sacrificing what was once so carefully created. I, the gardener, am like God. Through me, nature flows, giving vigor to the strong and enabling the weak and damaged to pass. Inside the house, the landline telephone clamors, taking 7 rings for Mrs. Nolan to stir from her armchair, doze and mobilize her arthritic joints to answer it. Crouched here beneath the open kitchen window, I am perfectly placed to eavesdrop what she says. Hello, this is Miriam. Oh, I'm as well as can be expected. And you? Yes, a very hot spell. The garden's very thirsty. Oh, really? You're too kind. Honestly, it's too much. It's an absolute honor. I can't quite take it all in. Trevor would have been so pleased, so very, very pleased. Thank you ever so much. It's all such a surprise. I certainly will, and you too. Cheerio. The telephone pings as it's replaced in its cradle, and I sense Mrs. Nolan shuffling along to the back door to find me. I muse over the emotional wobble I overheard in her voice. She's been prone to tears since Mr. Nolan's unfortunate accident, and numerous well-meaning villagers have phoned to offer comfort, but this call was a curious one, and I'm keen to be enlightened. Mercy, are you there? Right over here, Mrs. Nolan. I sound as sweet as maple syrup. Mrs. Nolan emerges from the side of the house, blinking in the bright sunshine, taking a moment to locate me by the shadowy border. I've had the most remarkable news, Mercy. The village committee have nominated me for the Best Blooming Garden Award. How kind of them. I'm sure it's Trevor's dahlias that persuaded the judges. He took such meticulous care of them. Trevor deserved the nomination, not me. He'd have been so proud, but it's too late. Both Mrs. Nolan and I glance involuntarily to the place on the lawn where Mr. Nolan was found. I am pleasantly surprised to notice how prolifically the daisies are growing. They're clearly thriving from minerals in Mr. Nolan's blood. Here we go. Mrs. Nolan's eyes are welling up, and her chin is wobbling. I stand, knit my eyebrows together with a show of concern, and gently usher her back indoors to put the kettle on. That's when I know there is no hope left for Mrs. Nolan. A well-meaning nomination, probably from sympathy votes, has exacerbated her misery and reduced her to convulsive weeping, proving any pleasure in life is now well beyond her grasp. What particularly irks me is that the dahlias were mostly attended to by myself, at least ever since Mr. Nolan's stroke last year, and I've exclusively cared for them since his recent demise. The dahlias, the roses, those blousy, vulgar petunias that Mrs. Nolan chose, and I obediently bedded in. The nomination is all thanks to me. The world has no place for the old and feeble. In this very garden, right under our noses, nature uses all manner of macabre means to ensure order is kept. Pincers, stingers, poisons, parasites that eat their host slowly from within. Although violent, these acts are essentially a great kindness. A kindness Mrs. Nolan now deserves. Star. I ponder my options. Whilst some impulsivity was involved with Mr. Nolan, this time I'll carefully consider my plan. Not to say last time wasn't efficient and effective. I'd taken great care that afternoon to prune the privet hedge to perfection. I was clearing away the cuttings, gloved as the sap can sting, whilst Mr. Nolan limped up and down, pedantically questioning some cross-branch irregularities he perceived in the shrubs. I pitied him, unable as he was to appreciate my work and no longer able to manage the shears himself with one useless arm. It was the least I could do to relieve him of his agitation once and for all. Stepping close, I plunged the points of the shears into his fleshy, cotton-shirted paunch, which gave little more resistance than a fish belly, and slid the blades upwards under his ribs. It was remarkably easy. This single moment of pain was all it took to free him from his frustrated, failing body. A poppy crimson stain blossomed under his spread fingers as he clutched his gut in a futile attempt to hold back the seeping blood. Before my eyes, his pallid face became slack-jawed with disbelief. He gurgled and spluttered, eyes bulging pleadingly, but there was nothing left to be said. As he staggered, I gently grasped him by the shoulders and guided him down to the ground face first, so the blade tips emerged through his back like fresh new shoots. It looked every bit the tragic accident, the clumsy fall of a foolish man carrying tools he couldn't handle when he should have left the work for the gardener. I removed the remaining cuttings under the pretense I'd left much earlier, and left him for Mrs. Nolan to find after she returned from the parish cake sale. Perhaps a similarly violent end for Mrs. Nolan would be fitting. I'm briefly excited by the thought of her pale wrists cut to scarlet ribbons by secateurs. Driven to suicide by grief, of course. I suspect the bleeding out could take some time, and given the neighbors' windows will be wide open in the summer heat, enabling them to hear her screams, maybe this is an unwise option. A fall on the patio? I think of Mrs. Nolan's head as the snail shell crushed between my fingers, and wonder if one blow would be enough. Multiple blows would be inconsistent with a fall, raising suspicions that could compromise the innocent image I'm associated with throughout the village. I'm reluctant to take such risk. My eyes narrow thoughtfully as I scan the tapestry of summer-petaled foliage in the garden borders. Star Mrs. Nolan's made of Victoria sponge. She tells me it's to celebrate the Best Blooming Garden nomination, but I can see her tired old heart's not in it. Nevertheless, we're both playing along with her pointless charade while it lasts. "Do have a slice before you go," she urges me. "I'll wrap up an extra slice for you to take home." We're sat at her little kitchen table. I've taken Mr. Nolan's chair as I'm curious to see her reaction, but she doesn't comment. She's adored my company since he's been gone. Evidence of her lonely, pitiful existence. My heart swells to think that soon I'll have released her from her misery. "Won't you have any tea, Mercy?" She looks quizzically over the top of her cup at my untouched one. I'm enjoying the delicious cake, Mrs. Nolan. I'm certainly glowing with anticipation. Not at the sickly slice on my plate, but to see beads of sweat break out on her forehead. Mrs. Nolan raises a hand, her heart, probably feeling some palpitations. "Mercy, you've been a rock over these last few weeks. I don't know how I would have coped without you," she tells me earnestly. A curious sensation passes through me, a brief flicker of guilt, possibly even doubt. After all, it's not too late, is it? I push the inconvenient emotions away. Remembering my role as gardener requires ruthless management of the weak and sickly. And I wait. It's all happening fast now. Panic creeps into Mrs. Nolan's face as her heart begins to gallop like wild horses. She gasps, reaches out a hand towards me, but knocks my plate of cake onto the floor. Both smash into pieces on the tiles. Digitalis perurea, a cottage garden favorite commonly known as the foxglove, is an excellent pollinator, adding height and structure to summer borders. It's also highly toxic. The foxgloves I propagated have been glorious this year, in my opinion, outshining the dahlias by far. From the unripe green seeds, I've ground a paste and steeped it in the tea that Mrs. Nolan's poured from the pot. Her cup stands empty on the table, white and fluted like the trumpet of a foxglove flower. I watch closely, and am certain Mrs. Nolan experiences minimal pain as her racing heart outruns itself, my face disappearing from her view as her vision blurs and darkens. At her age, no one will suspect a thing. Star, the village shop door tinkles as I enter, and I wait patiently while Janet serves a child buying sweets from one of the large jars on the shelf. I smile indulgently at the youngster who glances uneasily at me and takes a wary, wide sidestep around me as he leaves. so strange that children often sense their vulnerability better than their adult counterparts. Mercy, how are you bearing up? Janet is the picture of kind concern. Such a blow to hear about Miriam. I heard you were there when she took poorly. It was terrible, I murmur, eyes downcast. She'd never truly recovered from finding Mr. Nolan in such a state. It was the shock, wasn't it? And a broken heart. Maybe it's all for the best. Janet shudders before her bright demeanor returns. What can I help you with? Could I pop a note in the window, please? To let people know I'm available for work. With Janet's permission, I take out from my bag the card I've carefully written my number on and slide it into one of the plastic sleeves hanging in the shop window. It's placed alongside local business cards and adverts for piano tuition and babysitting. In my neat, orderly cursive, I've written my number and a friendly message. I'm confident there will be a good response, especially as the Best Blooming Garden Award is still up for grabs. Does your garden need some love and care? Call now for experienced help. Just ask for mercy.